Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I never paid attention to the scratching until the day I found the hammer in my neighbor's garden shed. The sound had been there for weeks, maybe months, a soft, rhythmic scraping that seemed to come from somewhere inside the walls of my apartment. I'd assumed it was pipes settling or maybe mice. Old buildings make all kinds of noises, and I'd learned to tune them out. But that morning, as I sat drinking coffee in the kitchen, the scratching stopped abruptly. The silence felt heavier than the noise ever had. My neighbor across the hall had moved out 3 days earlier. No goodbye, no forwarding address, just gone. The landlord mentioned something about a family emergency, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine when he said it. I'd lived next to her for 2 years, and she'd never mentioned having family. The hammer was old, wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. Dark stains covered the metal head, rust, I told myself, though rust doesn't usually flake off in chips that look so much like dried blood. I found it buried under a pile of newspapers in her shed, newspapers that all carried the same headline about a missing person case that had gone cold months ago. I brought the hammer inside and set it on my kitchen counter. Under the fluorescent light, those stains looked different, more deliberate, like someone had tried to clean it but missed the spots where the handle met the metal. That's when I heard it again, the scratching, but this time I could tell exactly where it was coming from, the wall that separated my apartment from hers. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper. The sound was definitely coming from inside the wall, but it wasn't random. There was a pattern to it. 3 short scratches, pause, 3 long ones, pause, 3 short again, over and over, like someone trying to communicate. The next day I called the landlord about getting into her apartment. He became defensive immediately, claiming he'd already cleaned it out, that there was nothing to see. But his voice cracked when he said it, and he hung up before I could ask any more questions. The scratching continued every night, always the same pattern, always starting around the same time I usually went to bed. I began staying up, listening, trying to understand what it meant. During one of these late-night vigils, I noticed something I'd missed before. The pattern wasn't coming from inside the wall. It was coming from the other side of it. Someone was still in her apartment. I tried knocking on her door, no answer. I tried calling out, identifying myself as her neighbor, nothing but silence. But that night the scratching was more frantic, more urgent. The pattern broke. Instead of the methodical 3 short, 3 long sequence, it became chaotic, desperate. The smell started a few days later. Sweet and sickly, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. It seemed to seep through the walls themselves, growing stronger near the baseboard where her apartment shared the wall with mine. I bought air fresheners, opened windows, but nothing could mask that increasingly familiar odor. I found myself holding the hammer more often, running my fingers over those dark stains. They felt rough under my fingertips, like sandpaper. Each time I touched them, I remembered fragments of conversations with my neighbor, how she'd mentioned having trouble sleeping, how she'd asked odd questions about the thickness of the walls, whether sound traveled between apartments. The police records were easier to access than I'd expected. The missing person case wasn't as cold as the newspapers suggested. There had been new developments, witness statements that placed the missing woman in our building just days before she disappeared. The description matched my neighbor perfectly, down to the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident she'd told me about. But my neighbor wasn't the victim. According to the witness statements, she was the last person seen with the missing woman. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, every footstep in the hallway made me grip the hammer tighter. The scratching had stopped completely now, replaced by something worse, absolute silence from the apartment next door. The kind of silence that feels alive, watching, waiting. Yesterday I found a key taped under the mailbox downstairs. No note, no explanation, just a brass key that looked exactly like the one to my apartment. I held it up to the lock on her door, and my hands started shaking before I could even try it. The key fit perfectly. The apartment was empty but not cleaned. Her furniture was still there, covered in a thin layer of dust. The air was thick with that sweet, rotting smell. I followed it toward the bedroom, toward the wall we shared. The wallpaper was peeling near the baseboard, and underneath I could see scratches carved directly into the drywall, the same pattern I'd been hearing for weeks. But the scratches were on my side of the wall. I ran back to my apartment and looked at my own bedroom wall. The wallpaper was intact, undisturbed. I pressed against it, feeling for soft spots, loose sections. Nothing. But when I put my ear to the wall, I could hear something new, breathing that wasn't my own. The hammer sits on my kitchen counter now, those dark stains seeming to grow darker each day. I've started making scratching sounds of my own, running my fingernails against the wall in that same 3 short, 3 long pattern. Sometimes something scratches back. I found newspaper clippings in my own drawer yesterday, clippings I don't remember cutting out. They're about the missing woman, about witness statements, about a neighbor who claimed to hear scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. The handwriting in the margins looks like mine, but I don't remember making those notes. The landlord hasn't returned my calls. The apartment next door remains empty, but the key still works. I've been going there more often, sitting in her chair, looking at the scratches on the wall. They seem deeper each time I visit, more deliberate. Last night I realized something that made my blood turn cold. The missing woman's description matches someone else too. Someone I see in the mirror every morning, someone whose handwriting fills the margins of those newspaper clippings, someone who's been holding a hammer with suspicious stains while listening to sounds that might not be coming from where I think they are. The scratching has started again, but now I can't tell which side of the wall it's coming from. And when I press my ear against the wallpaper, the breathing I hear might be my own. Crime 2, the basement door was always locked when I was growing up. Heavy brass key, the kind that makes a satisfying click when it turns. My grandmother kept it on a chain around her neck, tucked beneath her sweater where it would tap against her chest when she walked. I never questioned it then. Children accept what adults present as normal. But now, standing in her empty house with the estate lawyer's papers in my hand, that same key feels different in my palm, heavier. The metal is warm, like it holds memory. The house smells of lavender and something else I can't place, something metallic that catches in the back of my throat. I've been here a week now, sorting through decades of accumulated life, and that smell grows stronger near the basement door. The lawyer mentioned my grandmother was meticulous about her records. Everything documented, he said, everything preserved. I slide the key into the lock. The door opens with a sigh, releasing air that tastes stale and sweet. The wooden steps creak under my weight as I descend, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The basement is larger than I expected, stretching beyond what the house's footprint should allow. Along one wall, filing cabinets stand in perfect rows. Along another, shelves lined with mason jars, their contents dark and unidentifiable. But it's the desk in the center that draws my attention. Pristine mahogany, every surface organized with surgical precision. Folders arranged by date going back decades. Photographs paperclipped to typed reports. Maps with locations circled in red ink. I open the nearest folder. Inside, newspaper clippings about missing persons. A young woman who disappeared after her shift at a diner. A college student who vanished from a parking lot. A mother of two who left her car running outside a grocery store and was never seen again. Each clipping accompanied by handwritten notes in my grandmother's careful script. The photographs are more disturbing, not the victims, but surveillance shots. Parking lots, apartment buildings, the backs of people who don't know they're being watched. One shows a woman unlocking her car, purse strap sliding off her shoulder. Another captures someone walking alone down an empty street, streetlights casting long shadows. My hands shake as I turn the pages. This isn't random collection. There's methodology here, pattern, each case studied with the focus of someone solving a puzzle rather than someone simply curious about tragedy. At the bottom of the file, I find audio cassettes labeled with dates. I locate an old player on a shelf and insert the first tape. My grandmother's voice fills the basement, younger than I remember, but unmistakably hers. Subject displayed typical patterns of routine. Same route, same timing, security awareness minimal. I fast forward, more observations, delivered in the same clinical tone she used when teaching me to bake cookies. Opportunity window confirmed. Weather forecast shows rain, reducing foot traffic. The recording stops. I sit in the silence, trying to reconcile this voice with the woman who braided my hair and made me hot chocolate when I couldn't sleep. The woman who warned me about strangers and taught me to always lock my doors. In another folder, I find receipts. Hardware stores, camping supplies, cleaning products purchased in bulk, dates that correspond with the disappearances. My stomach twists as I recognize the careful planning, the preparation that went into whatever happened to these people. But it's the final folder that breaks something inside me. Photographs of me, not family snapshots, but the same surveillance style as the others. Me walking to school, me at the playground, me sleeping in what I thought was the safety of my childhood bedroom. The photos span years, documenting my growth from child to teenager with the same methodical attention given to the strangers. Beneath the photos, a handwritten note, too close, too much risk, better to wait. I drop the folder, photographs scattering across the floor. Some drift under the desk, and as I reach to gather them, my fingers brush against something taped to the underside, an envelope thick with contents. Inside, more keys, dozens of them, each tagged with an address I don't recognize, and a list written in that same careful handwriting, names I've seen in the missing persons reports, locations that match the circled spots on the maps. The basement feels smaller now, walls pressing closer. I climb the stairs on unsteady legs, leaving the door open behind me. In the kitchen, I pour myself a glass of water with hands that won't stop trembling. The faucet drips, each drop counting seconds I can't get back. Outside, the neighborhood looks different than it did this morning. The houses seem to watch me through their windows. I wonder about their basements, their locked doors, their secrets pressed into foundation walls where no one thinks to look. I should call someone, the police, the FBI, anyone trained to handle discoveries like this. But who would believe me? And what exactly would I report? That my grandmother, the woman who raised me, who everyone in town remembers as gentle and kind, was something else entirely. The water tastes like metal, like the smell that clings to the basement air. I return to the kitchen table where the estate papers wait. Among them, a sealed letter addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting. I haven't opened it yet, haven't been ready for whatever final words she left behind. Now I tear the envelope carefully, preserving the precise way she folded the paper inside. My dear child, it begins, if you're reading this, you've found what I've kept hidden. You understand now why some doors stay locked, why some questions shouldn't be asked. But you've asked them anyway, just as I knew you would. Curiosity is a gift we share. The letter continues, explaining nothing and everything. She speaks of choices made in darkness, of problems solved quietly, of a community kept safe by methods no one needed to understand. She writes about love, about protection, about the sacrifices required to maintain the illusion of safety. The keys will tell you where they are, the letter concludes. What you do with that knowledge is your choice, but remember that some truths are heavier than the secrets that hide them. I fold the letter along its original creases and place it back in the envelope. Through the kitchen window, I watch neighbors returning from work, children playing in yards, couples walking dogs down sidewalks that have never felt dangerous. This place that raised me, that taught me what normal looked like. The basement door stands open, waiting. The keys rest on the table beside the unfinished estate paperwork. Somewhere, families still wait for answers about loved ones who disappeared. Somewhere, evidence lies buried beneath the foundation of trust this community was built on. I pick up my phone, thumb hovering over the numbers that could end this silence, but I don't press them, not yet, because some discoveries require more than evidence. They require the strength to bear the weight of what comes after the truth. The house settles around me as darkness approaches. In the basement, those files wait in their perfect order. Outside, the neighborhood prepares for another peaceful night, trusting in the safety my grandmother spent decades creating through methods they'll never need to understand. Unless I make a different choice than she did. The keys are heavy in my palm, each one a doorway to questions I'm not sure I want answered. But curiosity, as she said, is a gift we share, and some gifts, once received, can never be returned. Crime 3, it wasn't strong, just enough to notice when I opened the door. I don't store cleaning products there, only coats and boots. I pulled everything out and noticed the wall felt soft or damp. I pressed and a section gave way. Behind the drywall was plastic sheeting taped down. The smell hit harder there, and something was leaking behind it. I'd been living in this house for 3 months. The previous tenant had left suddenly, according to the landlord. Personal emergency, he said, left most of her furniture behind. I thought I was lucky. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood quiet, too quiet maybe. The woman next door had watched me move in from her kitchen window. I could feel her eyes tracking my boxes, my furniture. When I finally introduced myself, she gripped my hand too long and asked if I'd found everything the previous tenant left behind. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I told her I had, mostly clothes and kitchen items. She nodded slowly, like she was processing something important. That first week I kept finding things that didn't belong to me. A prescription bottle with pills still inside, tucked behind the bathroom mirror. A journal wedged between the mattress and box spring. The handwriting was careful, measured. The entry stopped abruptly in the middle of a sentence about someone following her home from work. The last entry was just 2 words, he knows. I should have called the landlord, should have asked questions. Instead, I read every page twice, looking for clues about who she was, where she went. The more I read, the more the house felt different, smaller, like the walls were listening. The neighbor knocked on my door 3 weeks after I moved in. She brought cookies and conversation that felt rehearsed. She mentioned the previous tenant's boyfriend, how they used to argue late into the night, how he had a key, how he still drove by sometimes, slowing down in front of the house. She watched my face carefully when she said this, like she was measuring my reaction. I started noticing the car myself. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It would park across the street in the evenings. Never the same time, never the same duration, but always there, engine running. I could see the exhaust in the cold air. When I looked directly at it, it would drive away slowly, deliberately. The journal entries became an obsession. I cross-referenced dates with calendar marks I found on the refrigerator. Doctor appointments, work schedules, social events, all normal except for the X marks on random days with no explanation. The X marks increased in frequency toward the final entries, sometimes 2 or 3 in a single week. I found the first recording device while cleaning the bedroom. Tiny, black, stuck under the nightstand drawer, still warm, still recording. My hands shook as I turned it over, looking for identifying marks. Nothing, just a red light blinking steadily in the dim room. How long had it been there? How many conversations had it captured? That night I searched every room methodically, found 4 more devices, all active, all positioned to capture daily routines, private conversations, movements through the house. Someone had been listening to me for months, watching my patterns, learning my schedule. The recordings I retrieved were hours of mundane daily life. My phone calls, television programs, conversations with delivery drivers, but scattered throughout were older recordings. A woman's voice, scared and whispering, pleading with someone to leave her alone, crying softly while doing dishes, making plans to disappear, to start over somewhere safe. Her voice became familiar, intimate. I knew her breathing patterns, her nervous habits, the way she hummed when she thought she was alone. In the final recording, she's packing, throwing clothes into bags rapidly, footsteps on the porch, a key turning in the lock, her sharp intake of breath, then silence. The neighbor visited again, this time without cookies. She asked direct questions about strange smells, unusual sounds, whether I'd found anything that belonged to the previous tenant. Her eyes kept drifting toward the hallway closet. She mentioned that the police had asked similar questions, but they'd stopped investigating when they couldn't locate the missing woman. Case went cold, she said. These things happen. I started avoiding the closet entirely. The smell was getting stronger, spreading to adjacent rooms, sweet and chemical simultaneously. My sleep became restless, filled with dreams of muffled voices and scratching inside walls. I'd wake up convinced someone was moving around downstairs, but the house was always empty. The dark sedan appeared more frequently, sometimes parked, sometimes driving past slowly. I started documenting license plates, taking photographs. The images were always blurred, like the camera couldn't quite focus on the vehicle, but I could see the silhouette of someone watching from the driver's seat, waiting. 3 weeks ago, I found a key taped under the kitchen sink. It didn't fit any lock in the house, but it was warm, recently placed. Someone had been inside while I was at work, moving through my space, leaving traces of their presence. The thought made my skin crawl, made every shadow feel threatening. The recordings continued accumulating, conversations I didn't remember having, sounds I couldn't identify, and underneath it all, faint but persistent, the sound of someone crying. Not me, someone else, someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The audio quality was poor, distorted, but the emotion was unmistakable. Desperation. Last week I finally opened the closet fully, removed the plastic sheeting carefully, like evidence. The smell overwhelmed me immediately. Behind the false wall was a space I hadn't known existed, large enough for a person to hide or be hidden. The walls were scratched, like fingernails had clawed at the wood, and in the corner, bundled in more plastic, something that might have been clothes, or might have been something else entirely. I sealed everything back up, called in sick to work, sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, trying to decide who to call. The police seemed obvious, but the neighbor's words echoed in my mind. They'd already investigated. They'd found nothing. What made me think they'd find something now? The dark sedan is parked outside as I write this, has been there since morning. I can see movement inside, the glow of a phone screen. Someone checking messages, making calls, planning something. The engine hasn't turned off in hours. I keep thinking about the journal entries, the recordings, the hidden space behind my closet wall, about a woman who disappeared without explanation, leaving behind only traces of fear and evidence of surveillance, about how easily someone can vanish when no one is paying attention, when everyone assumes they left by choice. The key is still warm in my pocket. I haven't figured out what it opens yet, but I know it's important. The answer to questions I'm afraid to ask directly. The truth about what happened in this house before I arrived, and what might happen to me if I stay much longer. Tomorrow I'll decide whether to use the key or throw it away, whether to investigate further or pack my bags like she did, whether to trust the police or trust my instincts about the car outside, the neighbors' strange questions, the recordings that capture voices that shouldn't exist. But tonight I'll listen to the scratching inside the walls and wonder if it's just the house settling, or if it's something else entirely, trying to communicate from behind the false barriers someone built to keep secrets buried, trying to tell me what really happened here, what's still happening here. The smell is getting stronger. Crime 4, I was wiping crumbs from the underside of the dining table when my fingers hit tape. I peeled it back and found a phone wedged flat against the wood. It was on, recording. There were dozens of files on it, all labeled with numbers. I clicked the latest one. It was my voice last night, arguing, crying, then silence, then another voice I didn't recognize. The phone felt heavier than it should have. My thumb hovered over the play button of the first file. The timestamp showed it was created weeks ago, back when everything still felt normal, back when I thought I knew everyone in my life. I pressed play. My own voice filled the kitchen, but I was talking to someone who wasn't there anymore. Someone who had been asking questions about money, about passwords, about where I kept important documents. The conversation sounded casual enough, but listening to it now, with the phone trembling in my hands, every word carried a different weight. The recording cut off abruptly. I scrolled through more files. There were conversations with my sister, discussions about insurance policies I'd forgotten we'd had. There were calls with my bank, conversations about account access that I couldn't remember making. Each file was a piece of my life, carefully preserved by someone who had been listening all along. I found a folder marked with just an initial. Inside were recordings of phone calls I'd never made, someone using my voice but saying things I'd never said, confirming appointments I'd never scheduled, agreeing to meetings I'd never planned to attend. The voice was mine, but the words belonged to someone else entirely. The house felt different now. Every room seemed to hold shadows I hadn't noticed before. I walked through each space, looking for other devices, other signs that my privacy had been invaded. Under the bathroom sink, I found a small camera. Behind the bedroom mirror, another recording device. Each discovery made my chest tighten. I called the number that appeared most frequently in the phone's call log. It rang once before connecting to a voicemail I recognized immediately. It was my own voice again, but the message was one I'd never recorded. It gave instructions about keys hidden under flower pots, about security codes I'd never shared with anyone. The living room showed signs of recent activity. Papers had been moved, drawers searched through with surgical precision and put back almost perfectly. Almost. The person who had done this knew my habits well enough to replicate my organizational system. They had studied me. I found a notebook wedged between couch cushions. The handwriting wasn't mine, but it contained detailed observations about my daily routine, what I ate for breakfast, when I left for work, who I talked to when I was most likely to be asleep. The entries went back months, maybe longer. Someone had been documenting my entire existence. The final pages of the notebook contained financial information. Account numbers I recognized and some I didn't. Social security details. Passwords written in careful block letters. Below that, a list of debts in my name that I'd never incurred. Credit cards I'd never applied for. Loans I'd never taken out. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a stranger. I wondered how long someone else had been living pieces of my life while I went through the motions of normalcy. How many conversations had been recorded? How many decisions had been made using my identity while I slept? I tried calling the police, but when they asked for my identification, half the information in my wallet no longer matched their records. My address had been changed. My emergency contacts had been updated. Even my employer had received resignation letters I'd never written. The woman who answered my old work number didn't recognize my voice. She insisted I'd called weeks ago to confirm I wouldn't be returning. She had documentation, audio recordings of our conversation that I'd never had. I went back to the taped phone and played the most recent recording again. My voice was arguing with someone about money, about trust, about promises that had been broken. But I couldn't remember the argument. I couldn't remember feeling that angry, that desperate. The person on the other end of the conversation spoke with familiarity, like they knew secrets about me that I'd forgotten myself. The last few seconds of the recording contained something that made my blood stop moving. Footsteps, a door closing, then my own voice again, but quieter now, almost whispering. Talking to someone who was apparently still in the room, making plans about what to do next, discussing how to handle the situation if anyone started asking questions. I realized I was holding evidence of conversations I couldn't remember having with people I couldn't identify about decisions that had changed my entire life. The voice was mine, but the thoughts, the intentions, the choices, they belonged to someone else who had somehow learned to speak with my tongue. The house still smells like the person who recorded these conversations. The scent lingers in corners where I never spend any time, sweet perfume mixed with something medicinal. Its strongest near the basement door, which I found unlocked even though I never go down there. I've been sitting at this same dining table for what feels like hours, listening to recordings of myself making promises I don't remember, confessing to actions I can't recall taking. Each file reveals another layer of a life that someone else has been living while wearing my identity like a carefully fitted mask. The phone is still recording. Even now, as I sit here trying to piece together how much of my life has been stolen, it's capturing every word I speak, every breath I take, waiting for someone to retrieve it and add this conversation to their collection. I don't know who will come for the phone. I don't know if they'll be surprised to find me here, or if this moment was always part of their plan. But I keep listening to my own voice telling lies I never spoke, and I'm beginning to wonder if the person I thought I was ever really existed at all. Crime 5, I always kept the door shut, mostly because I hated how cold that room stayed, no matter the season. The heating vents never seemed to reach it properly, and there was something about the way shadows fell across the hardwood floor that made me uncomfortable. But that afternoon, when I walked past on my way to grab laundry, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The door was cracked open, just barely, maybe an inch. I could see a sliver of the unmade bed through the gap. I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. The bed sheets were pulled down on one side, not messy exactly, but deliberately disturbed. Like someone had laid there for a while, then gotten up carefully, trying not to leave too much evidence. The pillow still held a slight depression. When I pressed my hand against the mattress, it felt faintly warm. My first thought was logical. Maybe the cleaning lady had used the room to rest. Maybe she'd gotten sick and needed to lie down. But she'd been here 3 days ago, and I'd checked this room yesterday morning. The bed had been perfectly made then. I called the landlord immediately. He lived downstairs in the duplex and usually answered on the first ring. This time it took 6 rings before he picked up. "The guest room," I said without preamble. "Someone's been in it." There was a pause, then he said he'd checked the security cameras he'd installed last month after a break-in down the street. While I waited, I walked through the rest of my apartment looking for signs of disturbance. Nothing seemed out of place. The front door was locked, deadbolt engaged. The windows were secure, but in the guest room I noticed something else. A faint smell lingered in the air, not unpleasant exactly, but unfamiliar, like soap mixed with something else I couldn't identify, something medicinal maybe, or metallic. 20 minutes later, the landlord knocked on my door. His face looked troubled. "The cameras didn't catch anything," he said, "but I need to ask you something. Do you still have the key to the attic?" I stared at him. "What attic?" "The one above your guest room. There's an access panel in the ceiling. The previous tenant had a key made because she used it for storage." I'd lived here for 8 months and never knew there was an attic. He led me back to the guest room and pointed to a nearly invisible seam in the ceiling above the bed. When I looked closely, I could see it was actually a small door, painted the same color as the rest of the ceiling. "She left some boxes up there," he continued. "Personal things. I was supposed to clear them out but never got around to it. I gave her the key when she moved in, but she never returned it." The previous tenant, I'd never met her, never even learned her name. The landlord had only mentioned that she'd left suddenly, breaking her lease without explanation. I'd assumed it was a job transfer or relationship issue. People moved unexpectedly all the time. "What kind of personal things?" I asked. He shrugged. "Photo albums, documents, some clothes, nothing valuable. But the thing is, she came by last week asking about them. Said she needed to retrieve something important. I told her I'd need to coordinate with you since it's your apartment now." My skin prickled. "You gave her my information." "Just your phone number. She said she'd call to set up a time." I never received a call, but someone had been in my guest room, someone who knew about the attic access, someone who had a key. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the warm spot on the mattress, about the medicinal smell, about the way the sheets had been pulled down so carefully, as if someone had been trying not to wake me while I slept just 2 rooms away. I decided to investigate the attic myself. I dragged a chair into the guest room and climbed up to examine the ceiling panel. It pushed up easily, revealing a dark space above. I used my phone's flashlight to look inside. The first thing I saw were the boxes the landlord had mentioned, but they'd been opened. Contents spilled out onto the attic floor. Photographs, letters, what looked like medical records, and something else that made my blood freeze. A sleeping bag, unrolled and recently used. Next to it was a small pile of food wrappers, a water bottle, and a notebook with entries dated from the past 2 weeks. I climbed down immediately and called the landlord again. This time he didn't answer. I left a message, trying to keep my voice steady, explaining what I'd found. Then I called the police. The officers who responded were professional but seemed skeptical. They examined the attic, took photos, and filed a report, but without evidence of theft or vandalism, there wasn't much they could do. The previous tenant had never officially returned her key. Technically, she might still have legal access to her stored belongings. Change your locks, one officer suggested, and maybe install your own security system. After they left, I sat in my living room trying to process what had happened. Someone had been living above my bedroom for weeks, watching me, listening to me, coming down to use my guest room when I wasn't home, or maybe even when I was asleep. I thought about all the times I'd felt like I was being watched, the unexplained sounds from upstairs that I'd attributed to settling wood, the way my food seemed to disappear faster than I remembered eating it, the guest room door that I'd occasionally found ajar, which I'd blamed on drafts. The notebook bothered me most. I'd only glimpsed it briefly, but I'd seen my name written multiple times, and dates that corresponded to my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, when I had visitors. I never did reach the landlord that night. The next morning I learned why. A neighbor mentioned seeing an ambulance at his apartment the evening before. Heart attack, she said. He was in intensive care, condition unknown. I changed my locks that same day, installed motion sensors, put cameras in every room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important, something about the previous tenant's sudden departure, something about the timing of the landlord's medical emergency. 3 days later, I found another note slipped under my door. Not in the notebook's handwriting, but in careful block letters. I only wanted what was mine. Check the box marked insurance papers. 3rd photo from the top. You'll understand then. I should have called the police again. Should have shown them the note. Instead, I found myself climbing back into the attic, searching through the scattered contents until I found the box she'd mentioned. The insurance papers were there, but they weren't what she'd wanted me to see. The 3rd photo was a picture of my landlord, but he looked different, younger, cleaner shaven. He was standing next to a woman I didn't recognize, both of them smiling in front of a house I'd never seen. On the back in faded ink, "Happy first anniversary, love always." I stared at the photo for a long time before I understood. The woman in the picture was my mysterious previous tenant, the landlord's wife, the woman who'd supposedly left suddenly, breaking her lace without explanation. But if she was his wife, why had he rented her apartment to me? Why had he pretended not to know her well? And why was she hiding in the attic, watching me live in what had been her home? I never found answers to those questions. The landlord died 2 days later without regaining consciousness. The woman never returned, as far as I know. I moved out the following month, but I kept the photograph. Sometimes I study their faces, looking for clues about what really happened between them. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, still watching someone else's life unfold in spaces that used to belong to her. Sometimes I wonder if I was supposed to find that photo, or if discovering it was the mistake that made her disappear again. But mostly I wonder about the notebook, about all those dates and observations, about what she was really doing up there in the dark, night after night, listening to me breathe. Crime 6, she barked at the door every time I walked near it, not playfully like she was warning me. I thought it was mice or maybe a draft. I opened the door and went down, flashlight in hand. The walls were damp, the smell was sharp. Then I saw them, scratches on the inner side of the door, deep and frantic. They weren't there before. I never locked anyone in. But someone had been here. I'd inherited the house from my uncle after his sudden passing. Heart attack, they said. Found him at the kitchen table, morning coffee still warm. The funeral was small. He kept to himself, neighbors barely knew him. I moved in because the rent was free and my savings were thin. The basement was just storage space, boxes of his belongings I hadn't sorted through yet. The dog came with the house in a way. She showed up the second week, thin and skittish, wearing a collar with no tags. I fed her scraps and she stayed. She explored every corner of the property except that basement door. She'd approach, sniff, then retreat with her ears flat against her head. The scratches were about chest height on a grown person, 4 parallel lines deep enough to catch splinters. I ran my finger along them, feeling the desperation in each gouge. My hands were shaking when I reached for the light switch. The single bulb cast harsh shadows across stacked boxes and old furniture. That's when I noticed the carpet. It was newer than everything else down there, a thick, industrial gray that didn't match the rest of the house. It covered about 6 feet of floor space directly beneath where someone might stand if they were clawing at that door. I knelt and pressed my palm against it. The padding underneath was thick, too thick for a basement floor. I found the crowbar in my uncle's toolbox upstairs. The carpet peeled back easily, like it had been laid recently. Underneath was concrete, but it was different from the rest of the floor. Smoother, newer, a rectangular patch about the size of a grave. The dog was watching from the top of the stairs, whimpering. I should have called someone then, should have walked away. Instead, I drove to the hardware store and rented a jackhammer. The clerk asked what I was breaking up. I told him an old patio. He nodded and went back to his newspaper. The concrete was thin, barely 3 inches. Underneath was loose dirt that came up easily in my hands. It was still soft, still dark with moisture. I dug with a garden spade, my pulse hammering in my ears. 2 feet down, I found the shoe. It was small, a woman's sneaker, white with pink laces, still tied. I stared at it for a long time before I kept digging. The leg was next, still wearing jeans. Then more bones, scattered and strange. The skull was last, and when I saw it, I understood why the dog wouldn't come down here. She had tried to warn me. I sat on the basement steps with my phone in my hand, trying to decide who to call. The police would ask questions I couldn't answer. How long had she been down there? Who was she? Why hadn't my uncle reported her missing? Then I remembered the boxes. I found the photos in a shoebox marked with my uncle's handwriting, personal. There were dozens of them, all of the same woman. She was young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and a bright smile. In some photos, she was laughing. In others, she looked uncomfortable, like she didn't know she was being photographed. The last photo was different. She was sitting at my uncle's kitchen table, looking directly at the camera. Her eyes were wide, scared. Her hands were flat on the table, and I could see rope marks around her wrists. On the back, my uncle had written a date from 6 months ago and a single word, sorry. I found her purse behind the water heater. Her driver's license was still inside. She had lived across town, worked at a coffee shop downtown. I recognized the place. I'd been there dozens of times over the years. She might have served me coffee. She might have smiled at me. The missing person report was easy to find online. She disappeared walking home from work. Her car was found in the parking lot behind the coffee shop. No signs of struggle, no witnesses. The investigation had gone cold after 3 weeks. I called the police station and asked to speak to the detective on her case. When he answered, I almost hung up. Instead, I told him I had information about the missing woman. He said he'd been waiting for someone to call. Her family never stopped looking, he said. They knew someone had taken her. I gave him my uncle's address and told him to bring a team. I didn't tell him I was related to the homeowner. I didn't tell him I'd been living here for 2 months. I just said I'd found something in the basement that he needed to see. After I hung up, I walked outside and sat on the front porch. The dog came and sat beside me, pressing her warm body against my leg. She wasn't scared anymore. She was relieved. The police arrived 20 minutes later, 3 cars, lights flashing. The detective was older than I'd expected, with kind eyes and careful hands. He asked me to stay outside while they worked. They were down there for hours. I watched them carry out boxes of evidence, bags of bones, the camera my uncle had used to document what he'd done. The detective came to sit with me when they were finished. "How long have you been living here?" he asked. I told him the truth, 2 months since my uncle died. "Did you know him well?" I shook my head. Family gatherings maybe twice a year. He seemed normal. The detective nodded like he'd heard this before. They usually do. He asked me more questions. Had my uncle ever mentioned the woman? Had I noticed anything strange about the house? Had anyone else been living here? I answered everything honestly except the last question. I didn't tell him about the dog. I didn't tell him how she'd tried to warn me, how she'd known what was down there before I did. They arrested my uncle's corpse in a way. The case was closed but never truly solved. The family got answers but no justice. The woman got a proper burial but no peace. I moved out the next week, found a small apartment across town near where she used to work. Sometimes I drive past the coffee shop and wonder if I ever met her, if she ever smiled at me while pouring my coffee. The dog came with me. She sleeps at the foot of my bed now, and she's never afraid. But sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I think about those scratches on the basement door. I think about how desperate someone has to be to claw through wood with their bare hands. I think about my uncle sitting at that kitchen table, drinking his morning coffee, knowing what was buried beneath his feet. And I wonder how many other basements are out there, how many other dogs are trying to warn us about the things we'd rather not know. Crime 7, the grout had started to crack, so I pried off a few tiles near the bathtub. Behind them was writing scratched into the wall, repeated over and over, "Don't pretend you don't know." I stared at it for minutes. The handwriting looked familiar. A part of me wanted to believe it was a prank, but there were too many lines and one was signed with my initials. I'd been living in this house for 3 years. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had moved to assisted living. Her daughter handled the sale. Everything seemed normal during the inspection. The bathroom tiles were old but intact. Now, kneeling on the cold floor with pieces of ceramic scattered around me, I couldn't stop staring at those words carved into the drywall. The scratches were deep. Whoever did this had pressed hard, desperate to make the message permanent. Some letters were shaky, others precise. The repetition created a pattern that made my eyes water. "Don't pretend you don't know." Over and over, 17 times I counted. Then my initials at the bottom right, carved with the same frantic energy. I called the real estate agent first. She sounded confused, then defensive. No, she hadn't known about any writing behind the tiles. The previous owner had lived there for 40 years. Maybe it was from before her time. Maybe it was just coincidence that the initials matched mine. People share initials all the time. But something in her voice changed when I described the handwriting. She became quiet, asked me to text her a photo. Then she said she needed to make some calls and hung up. I spent the rest of that afternoon researching the house's history. Public records showed 4 previous owners over 60 years. The elderly woman had indeed lived there the longest. Before her, a young family had owned it for 8 years. Before them, a single man for 12 years. And originally, a couple who'd built the house. The county courthouse had more detailed records. The young family had left suddenly, sold the house below market value, and moved across the country. The listing agent's notes mentioned personal circumstances and urgent relocation. No forwarding address in the file. I found their names in old phone directories and started searching online. The husband had died in a car accident 5 years ago, but I found his widow on social media. Her profile was sparse, mostly photos of grandchildren and garden vegetables. I sent her a careful message explaining that I lived in their former house and had found something unusual during renovations. She called me within an hour. Her voice was shaky. She asked me to describe exactly what I'd found. When I mentioned the initials, she went silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she whispered, "Those are my daughter's initials too." Their daughter had been 16 when they lived in the house. A good student, quiet, artistic. She'd always loved that bathroom because it got the best natural light. She'd spend hours in there, drawing or reading. The mother had thought it was typical teenage behavior, wanting privacy and space. The problem started gradually. The daughter became withdrawn, stopped eating regular meals, began having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming about someone watching her. She insisted that someone was coming into the house at night, moving things around, leaving messages. The parents found nothing. No signs of break-ins, no disturbed locks, no footprints in the garden. The daughter began claiming that she was receiving written messages, hidden in her school locker, slipped under her bedroom door, tucked into her textbooks. Always the same message, "Don't pretend you don't know." She brought some of the notes to her parents, but they looked like her own handwriting. Her teachers reported similar incidents at school, notes appearing in her desk or backpack, always in her handwriting, always the same message. The family took her to doctors, therapists, specialists. Everyone had theories: stress, hormones, attention-seeking behavior, early signs of mental illness. The daughter became increasingly agitated, insisting that someone was trying to make her remember something she'd forgotten, something important, something dangerous. The final incident happened on a school night. The parents woke to the sound of running water. They found their daughter in the bathroom, fully clothed, sitting in the bathtub with the shower running. She was scratching something into the wall with a house key, over and over the same message. When they tried to stop her, she looked at them with complete confusion, as if she'd been sleepwalking. They moved within the month. The mother's voice cracked as she told me the rest. Her daughter had never recovered completely. She'd finished high school, gone to college, gotten married, had children, but she still had episodes, still woke up sometimes writing the same message, still insisted that she was supposed to remember something crucial but couldn't access the memory. I asked about the initials. The mother hesitated, then said her daughter had always been convinced that someone else was involved, someone whose name she couldn't recall but whose initials she somehow knew. She'd carved those initials obsessively, as if they were a clue she couldn't decode. After we hung up, I sat in my bathroom staring at the wall. The afternoon light streaming through the window was the same light that had drawn a troubled teenager to this spot decades ago. I touched the scratches, feeling the rough edges where the key had gouged the drywall. That evening I called my own mother. asked her about our family history, about places we'd lived when I was very young. She seemed surprised by the questions, but answered patiently. We'd moved several times during my early childhood. My father's job had required relocations every few years. I described the house, the neighborhood, the approximate time frame. My mother grew quiet. Yes, we'd lived in that area briefly when I was around 4 years old. She'd forgotten about that house. We'd only stayed 2 years before my father got transferred again. I asked her why we'd left so suddenly. She said it had been my father's decision. Something about the neighborhood not being suitable for raising children. She'd never understood his urgency to move, but she trusted his judgment. The conversation ended with my mother promising to look through old photo albums to see if she could find pictures from that house. She said she'd call me back if she remembered anything else. I spent the night researching the overlap between my family's time in the house and the teenage girl's residence there. The timing was close but not exact. We'd moved out about 6 months before her family moved in, but there had been a gap, a period when the house sat empty. The next morning I drove to the local library and asked to see archived newspapers from that period. The librarian helped me navigate the microfilm machine, and I scrolled through months of local news, looking for anything connected to my old address. I found it buried in a brief police report section. A break-in at the house during the vacant period. No arrests made, property damage minimal, vandalism reported. The details were sparse, but one line made my hands tremble. Graffiti found in multiple rooms, message repeated throughout house. The report didn't specify what the message said. I drove back home and stared at the bathroom wall again. The scratches seemed deeper in the afternoon light, more deliberate. I thought about a 4-year-old child living in this house, about what a 4-year-old might witness or experience or remember. I thought about how memories can hide, can surface later in unexpected ways, can manifest as obsessions or compulsions or desperate attempts to communicate something that can't quite be spoken. I picked up my phone and called the police department, asking if they had more detailed records from the break-in report. The desk officer transferred me to someone in records who told me that files from that long ago might be in storage. It would take time to locate them if they still existed at all. While I waited, I measured the wall behind the bathtub, calculated how many tiles I'd need to replace, how much work it would take to cover the scratches. But something stopped me from ordering the materials. Something about the desperate repetition of that message, about the way it had been hidden but preserved, about the way two people separated by years and circumstances had felt compelled to carve the same words in the same place. I started having dreams about the bathroom. Not nightmares exactly, but vivid, unsettling dreams where I was much smaller, looking up at the tiles from a different angle. In the dreams, someone was always just outside the bathroom door, speaking in a voice I couldn't quite hear, saying words I couldn't quite understand but somehow recognized. The police called back a week later. They'd found the file. The break-in had been more extensive than the newspaper reports suggested. Every room in the house had been vandalized with the same message, scratched into walls, written on mirrors, carved into wooden surfaces. Don't pretend you don't know. The investigating officer had noted that the damage appeared to be the work of someone young, based on the height of most markings and the imprecise nature of some of the scratching. But they'd never identified a suspect. The case had gone cold within months. I asked if there were any photos from the investigation. The officer said yes, but they were part of an unsolved case file. I couldn't access them without filing a formal request and demonstrating legitimate interest. That afternoon, I stood in my bathroom with a crowbar and began removing more tiles, not to repair anything, but to see what else might be hidden. Tile by tile, I exposed more of the wall, more scratches, more repetitions of the same message, and in the corner near the floor, barely visible even with the tiles removed, something else. A child's drawing done in crayon that had faded but not disappeared. Stick figures holding hands, a house with windows, and at the bottom, in shaky letters that could only have been written by someone very young, a single word that made my vision blur. My name, my actual name, not just initials, written in my own 4-year-old handwriting, which I recognized from birthday cards my mother had saved. I sat on the bathroom floor, surrounded by broken tiles and decades-old secrets, and realized that I wasn't investigating someone else's mystery. I was uncovering my own. The teenager who'd lived here after my family had moved, who'd been driven to madness by messages she couldn't understand, had been responding to something I'd left behind. Something I'd written or drawn or carved into these walls when I was too young to remember, too young to understand what I was trying to communicate. The message wasn't meant for her, it was meant for me. A 4-year-old's desperate attempt to make sure that someday, when I was old enough, I wouldn't pretend I didn't know what had happened in this house. But I still don't remember, and now I'm not sure I want to. Crime 8, I rent this place furnished. The nightstand came with a drawer I never opened until I dropped my keys and noticed it was already ajar. Inside was a small black device, a camera, wired, hidden well. I followed the cable through the wall. It led to the attic. The attic had a chair, a table, and a pile of cigarette butts beneath a tiny vent looking directly into my room. The smell hit me first when I climbed those narrow stairs. Stale tobacco mixed with something else. Something sweet and wrong. The wooden floorboards creaked under my weight, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs as I pushed open that small door. Dust particles danced in the single beam of light filtering through the vent, and there it was, this makeshift observatory overlooking my most private moments. I sat in that chair, the same chair someone else had occupied while watching me sleep, watching me change, watching me live my life in what I thought was complete privacy. The vinyl seat was worn smooth in the exact shape of another person's body. I could feel the indentation where they had settled in for long sessions of observation. My skin crawled at the thought of how many hours they had spent up there. The landlord seemed genuinely surprised when I called. His voice carried that particular tone people use when they're either truly innocent or exceptionally good at lying. He insisted he knew nothing about any camera, claimed the previous tenant had moved out months ago under normal circumstances. But when I pressed him about who had access to the property, his answers became vague. Maintenance workers, he said, the occasional inspector, his own visits to check on things. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored, the way my mail sometimes seemed disturbed, how certain items in my apartment appeared to have been moved just slightly from where I remembered placing them. The sound of footsteps in the hallway that would suddenly stop right outside my door, followed by a long silence before finally moving away. The police officer who responded to my call was younger than I expected. She photographed everything, documented the camera placement, took my statement with professional efficiency. But I could see something in her expression when she examined the setup in the attic. This wasn't the work of a casual voyeur. This was systematic, planned. Someone had invested considerable effort into creating this surveillance system. The investigation moved slowly. They dusted for fingerprints and found dozens of partial prints throughout the attic space, but none that matched anyone in their database. The camera itself was a common model, available at any electronics store, paid for with cash according to the manufacturer's records. Dead end after dead end, and all the while I continued living in that apartment, knowing someone had watched me from above for an unknown period of time. I began interviewing neighbors myself, asking casual questions about who they had seen coming and going from the building. The elderly woman across the hall mentioned a maintenance worker who used to visit frequently, someone she described as quiet and polite, always carrying a toolbox. But when I asked the landlord about this person, he claimed to have no record of any regular maintenance worker fitting that description. The man in the apartment below mine had a different story. He remembered hearing footsteps in the walls late at night, sounds that seemed to move through spaces where no one should have been walking. He had complained to the landlord multiple times, but was told it was probably just settling sounds from an old building. Now those noises made perfect sense, someone navigating the hidden passages between walls, accessing their observation post. I found more evidence as I searched deeper. In the attic, tucked behind an insulation panel, was a small notebook filled with handwritten observations. Dates, times, detailed notes about my daily routines. When I left for work, when I returned home, when I turned off the lights. The handwriting was neat, methodical, obsessive in its attention to detail. Whoever had written these entries knew my life better than I knew it myself. The most disturbing entries weren't about my activities, they were about my visitors. Friends who had come over for dinner were described in intimate detail. Their conversations had been recorded, their habits noted, their personal information somehow obtained and documented. This wasn't just about watching me. This was about cataloging everyone who entered my private space. I confronted the landlord again, this time with the notebook as evidence. His demeanor changed completely. Gone was the helpful, concerned property owner. In his place was someone who seemed almost relieved that the secret was finally out. He admitted that he had known about the surveillance setup, claimed it was installed by the previous tenant who had convinced him it was for security purposes. But his story had holes. If the previous tenant had installed the camera, how had the current observations continued for months after their supposed departure? How had someone maintained access to the attic space without the landlord's knowledge? When I pointed out these inconsistencies, he became defensive, then angry, finally ordering me to leave his office. The investigation stalled completely after that confrontation. The detective assigned to my case stopped returning my calls. When I visited the police station in person, I was told that without clear evidence of who had installed the surveillance equipment, there was little they could do. The case was classified as breaking and entering, filed away with hundreds of similar unsolved incidents. I moved out within the week, but the questions followed me to my new home. Who had been watching me and why? How long had the surveillance been active before I discovered it? Most troubling of all, was I the only victim, or were there others living unknowingly under similar observation? The new apartment feels safe, but I find myself checking every corner, every vent, every piece of furniture for hidden cameras. I've developed habits I never had before, covering mirrors at night, checking door locks multiple times, listening for sounds that don't belong. The violation of privacy has left scars that may never fully heal. Sometimes I wonder if my observer moved on to someone else, someone who hasn't yet discovered the small black device hidden in their furnished apartment. Someone who trusts the privacy of their own bedroom, unaware that their most intimate moments are being cataloged by invisible eyes. The thought keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the person who watched me is still out there, still watching. Crime 9, I moved it to clean underneath. The plug was coiled neatly on top. It hadn't been connected in weeks, maybe longer, but the fridge was cold. I opened it. The shelves were empty except for a single sealed bag tucked in the back corner. I touched it, still frozen. I didn't open it. I just stood there, staring until the humming stopped. That was the beginning. The moment when everything I thought I knew about my neighbor started to unravel. She had asked me to check on her apartment while she was away. Simple favor. Water the plants, collect the mail, make sure everything looked normal. I had her spare key for weeks, but only used it twice. The first visit was routine. Plants watered, mail stacked neatly on the kitchen counter. Nothing unusual. The second visit was different. The air felt thicker somehow, stale. I noticed the smell immediately, not decay, not spoilage, but something metallic and sharp that made my throat tight. The plants were already dying despite my care. Brown edges on leaves that had been green just days before. I checked the windows, all closed, no ventilation, no explanation for why healthy plants would wither so fast. I walked through each room methodically. Everything appeared normal. Bed made with military precision. Bathroom clean, towels folded and aligned. But in the living room I found the first inconsistency. Picture frames face down on the side table, not fallen, deliberately placed face down. I lifted one, a photo of her with a man I didn't recognize. He had kind eyes and a genuine smile, his arm around her shoulders. She looked different, younger, happier. I set it back down, face up this time. That's when I heard it, a low mechanical hum coming from the kitchen. I followed the sound to the refrigerator. The same hum every fridge makes, but when I looked closer I saw the cord, unplugged, coiled carefully on top of the appliance like someone had wrapped it deliberately. I touched the fridge door, cold, impossibly cold for something without power. My hands shook as I opened it. Empty shelves stared back at me, except for that single bag in the back corner. Clear plastic sealed tight, containing something dark and compact. I couldn't make out the contents through the condensation, but the weight felt wrong when I lifted it. Too heavy for its size. Too cold for something that should have been thawing for weeks. I set it back exactly where I found it and closed the door. The humming continued. I stood there trying to rationalize what I was experiencing. Fridges don't stay cold without power. Ice doesn't remain frozen without electricity. But the evidence was undeniable. Cold air against my face, frost on the walls inside, that bag still solid as stone. I left without touching anything else, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The next morning I called her, just to check in, I told myself. The phone rang once before going to voicemail. Her voice sounded different in the recording, strained, careful, like she was choosing each word deliberately. I hung up without leaving a message. 3 days passed before I used the key again. This time I brought gloves. The smell was stronger now, overwhelming the metallic scent with something organic and wrong. The plants were completely dead, brown stalks in bone-dry soil, but the fridge still hummed, still cold, still unplugged. I opened it again. The bag was gone. In its place, a note written in her handwriting, "Stop looking." 2 words, neat cursive on white paper. I turned it over, nothing else. Just those 2 words that made my stomach drop and my hands sweat despite the cold air flowing from the unplugged appliance. I checked every room again. This time I found more inconsistencies. A suitcase in the bedroom closet, partially packed but abandoned. Clothes folded halfway, then left in wrinkled piles. Toiletries missing from the bathroom counter. Prescription bottles with recent dates still full. Someone had started to leave but stopped, or been stopped. In her desk drawer I found phone bills with calls highlighted in yellow marker, all to the same number. Pages and pages of calls, some lasting seconds, others going on for an hour. I wrote down the number. When I got home, I researched it. Disconnected line. Had been for months, but according to her phone records, she'd been calling it every single day. The police report was filed a week later, missing person case. I gave them the key and told them about the unplugged fridge, the note, the highlighted phone bills. The officer took notes, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Fridges don't work without power, he said. People don't just disappear from locked apartments. There has to be a logical explanation. They found her car in the parking lot of a storage facility across town, keys still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat with her wallet intact, credit cards unused since the day she asked me to watch her apartment. The storage unit was paid for in advance, 6 months, cash payment, but the unit was empty except for a receipt taped to the back wall. Receipt for industrial freezer rental, paid in cash, same day her credit card stopped working. I never saw her again. The investigation went cold after 3 months. No evidence of foul play, they said. Adults have the right to disappear if they want to, but I know what I saw, what I felt. That fridge hummed for weeks without power, kept that bag frozen solid despite every law of physics. Sometimes I drive past her apartment, new tenant now, different curtains in the windows, but I wonder about that fridge, whether it's still there, whether it still hums without being plugged in, whether the new tenant has found anything unexpected in the back corner. The man from the photograph never came forward during the investigation. I showed his picture to the police, but they couldn't identify him. No missing person report matching his description. No one seemed to know who he was or where he might be, as if he never existed outside of that single photograph, face down on her table, waiting for someone to find him and wonder why she'd hidden his smile. I still have her spare key. The police never asked for it back. Sometimes I hold it and remember that metallic smell, that impossible cold, that bag I never opened. And I wonder if I should have. If opening it would have answered the questions that keep me awake, or if it would have created new ones I wasn't ready to face. The truth is probably simpler than what I've imagined. People leave. Relationships end badly. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are more complicated than reality, but that fridge shouldn't have been cold. Physics doesn't work that way, and I can't explain what I experienced with logic or reason. She asked me to make sure everything looked normal. I failed at that simple task, because nothing about any of it was normal. And now I'm left wondering if normal was ever possible, or if I just wasn't paying close enough attention to see the cracks that were already there. Story 10. In the old apartment, peculiar sounds echoed through the walls, groaning pipes, creaking floorboards. Yet the new tenant sensed a different presence, a deliberate rhythm in the steady footsteps from above. Odd, considering she resided on the top floor. One evening she summoned the courage to tap the ceiling with a broomstick. The noise ceased. Silence enveloped the room, thick and unsettling. Then a solitary knock resonated from within the ceiling. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the knocking to herself, attributing it to the building's settling or perhaps a stray critter roaming the attic. Night after night, the meticulous footfalls persisted, tracing invisible paths above her in the darkness. Sarah adjusted, cranking up the television volume, donning headphones at bedtime, anything to drown out the phantom steps haunting her ceiling. Detective Morris stumbled upon the apartment's enigma when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. Removing a section of drywall to mend a leak outside Sarah's unit, the worker unveiled a narrow passage unaccounted for in the building blueprints. Illuminated by a flashlight, the hidden space revealed a makeshift living area, discarded wrappers, empty bottles, a soiled blanket, and a weathered notebook. The superintendent promptly notified the authorities. Upon Detective Morris and Detective Rivera's arrival, the maintenance worker trembled, muttering, "Someone's been living in the walls, watching." In the notebook, detailed observations of Sarah Coleman unfolded her daily routine, her guests, her meals, her viewing habits. Neat handwriting descended into chaos on the final pages, strange symbols adorning the margins. "The subject ignores my signals now," the last entry lamented. "No one ignores me." Forensic teams scrutinized the crawl space, unearthed unidentifiable fingerprints, and unveiled a labyrinth of passages interwoven within the building's structure, some dating back decades. These secret routes led to 5 apartments but terminated in covert vantage points, concealed as innocuous fixtures, only in Sarah Coleman's abode. Interviews with current tenants yielded no anomalies beyond typical apartment noises. However, former residents recounted eerie sensations of being watched or hearing unexplained movements. One tenant hastily departed after a mere fortnight, yet none had voiced their concerns, fearing ridicule. A breakthrough emerged when microscopic blood spatter, matching Martin Weaver's DNA, a former resident who vanished without a trace 4 years prior, was discovered in a crawlspace. Martin's disappearance, following confrontations with a reclusive tenant named Edward, prompted a reevaluation of the case. Edward's nomadic past, his affinity for solitude, and his abrupt departures from various top-floor apartments unveiled a disturbing pattern. A visit to Edward's secluded property unearthed a chilling tableau of photographs of apartment residents, including Sarah and Martin, intricate maps of building structures, and journals chronicling his specimen observations. A corkboard adorned with missing persons reports, 6 of them, bore witness to Edward's macabre exploits. Beneath it, the ground bore testimony to unspeakable deeds. As forensic experts worked to identify the remains, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's building. Though the crawl spaces had been sealed, whispers of phantom noises persisted. During security system installations, a peculiar discovery surfaced: a newer notebook nestled in a crevice near the hallway ceiling with a foreboding message. "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The notebook echoed the previous one's cryptic prose, outlining Sarah's dwelling with a marked passage in crimson and a date for that night. Rushing to evacuate Sarah, officers found her residence deserted. Her phone rested on the counter, the television hummed, the shower streamed. In the bathroom, a message etched in steam on the mirror beckoned, "Look up." A removed ceiling panel above the shower unveiled a chilling void. The hunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker skilled in clandestine modifications, rages on. Thermal scans revealed no evidence of current occupancy within the walls. Sarah Coleman's whereabouts remain a mystery, intertwined with disappearances spanning multiple states. Authorities caution building managers against covert alterations and hidden compartments. For Detective Morris, the disquieting image isn't the graves or the diaries, but Sarah, ensnared in a sinister ballet of unseen footsteps above her, in a loft without an upper neighbor. Those steps that ceased when she rapped the ceiling, only to echo back. Sometimes, in the quiet of his home, Detective Morris gazes upward, listening intently, waiting, wondering who else might be listening too. Story 11: The Enigmatic Coffee Shop. The coffee shop had been his sanctuary for years, the same table, the same order, the same tranquil silence enveloping him like a familiar embrace. The barista recognized his face, but his name remained a mystery, buried beneath layers of anonymity. Then one fateful day, he simply vanished. When the police investigated his usual spot, they discovered a wallet abandoned, a silent witness to his inexplicable disappearance. Inside the wallet lay a driver's license bearing a photo, yet devoid of any name or address, just an eerie void where his identity should have resided. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the enigma, her fingertips tracing the cold metal table as she pored over the perplexing security footage. The figure, now known only as John Doe in the cryptic case files, appeared unremarkable on camera, average in height, nondescript in features, clad in a navy coat and carrying a weathered leather messenger bag. His vanishing act defied all logic, shrouded in a veil of unsettling mystery that gripped Mercer's curiosity. "Replay it," she directed the tech specialist. The footage unveiled John's mundane routine, entering the bustling coffee shop during the morning rush, ordering his usual black coffee sans sugar, and retreating to the secluded corner table adorned with a verdant plant. He sat, penning inscrutable words in a notebook, occasionally gazing out the window as he savored his coffee. Then came the pivotal moment, setting down his wallet, rising and striding towards the restroom corridor. Yet he never returned, never emerged from any exit. He simply dissolved into the ether. "Inspect the bathroom footage," Mercer urged. "He never set foot in a restroom," the specialist revealed. "It's as though he evaporated into thin air." Back at the precinct, Mercer meticulously sifted through the wallet's contents sprawled across her desk: a driver's license devoid of personal details, credit cards linked to non-existent accounts, meticulously arranged cash, a coffee shop receipt dated 3 days prior, and a solitary business card with only a faintly printed phone number. Dialing the number yielded a disconcerting silence, punctuated by faint rustling like fluttering pages. The barista, a silent witness to John's routine, offered sparse details. He was taciturn, polite, tipped generously, perhaps an accent, but his voice was but a whisper. Mercer probed further, inquiring if he had ever engaged in conversations or meetings. The barista shook their head, always solitary, engrossed in his writings. The notebook, a cryptic relic, lay open beside the forsaken wallet, its pages teeming with indecipherable codes and enigmatic sketches of unfamiliar architectural designs. Cryptographers labored in vain to unravel its mysteries. Mercer dispatched officers to canvass the neighborhood with John Doe's visage, yet no recognition surfaced, no missing persons report matched his description. It was as though he existed solely within the confines of that coffee shop. Amidst her scrutiny of the security footage, Mercer discerned a peculiar anomaly: the flicker of the time stamp each morning as John entered the shop. Dismissed as a technical glitch, Mercer harbored doubts. Returning to the coffee shop, she settled at his table, her gaze drifting between the entrance and the restroom corridor flanking an antique mirror, ornately embellished with symbols mirroring those in John's notebook. Interrogating the shop owner unveiled the mirror's antiquity, its immovable presence rooted in the shop's history. Approaching the mirror, Mercer beheld her reflection, detecting a subtle distortion that lent her image an uncanny depth. Expecting cool glass, her hand encountered an inexplicable warmth, prompting the arrival of the forensics team. Behind the mirror's facade, a concealed compartment harbored a trove of identical wallets, each housing a driver's license devoid of personal data. A leather-bound journal chronicled entries spanning decades, inscribed in the same hand as the notebook. The final entry ominously foretold: "The experiment must cease. They draw near. The threshold is waning." Fingerprints within the hidden enclave all matched John Doe, with carbon dating the earliest wallet to half a century past, despite the eternally unaged visage in the photo. The journal chronicled experiments in temporal displacement and identity transference, alluding to crossing back and convergence points. Mercer's attention gravitated to a passage hinting at the coffee shop's pivotal role as an intersection of realities, with the mirror as the conduit. As the investigation deepened, eerie phenomena besieged the coffee shop, with patrons recounting spectral reflections and sightings of John Doe at his customary table, contradicting the vacant surveillance footage. A breakthrough emerged when Margaret Keller, a retired physicist entwined in classified projects, identified John Doe as Daniel Weston, a brilliant scientist who vanished during quantum mirror experiments. Weston's research posited the existence of parallel realities accessed through certain locales acting as cosmic nexuses. Mercer uncovered the shop's lineage, built atop the laboratory where Weston's disappearance transpired. The investigation crescendoed as Mercer, scrutinizing the security footage one desolate night, glimpsed a spectral duality, John Doe and Daniel Weston, coexisting in a spectral ballet reflected in the shattered mirror. Bearing witness to the mirror's shattered remnants, Mercer beheld a final missive scribed in the familiar hand. The experiment concludes, the threshold seals shut, do not pursue. The enigma of the phantom who never was persisted as the coffee shop shuttered, the edifice succumbing to the wrecker's ball. Weston's remains eluded discovery, his journals vanishing under shrouds of mystery. Mercer, haunted by the enigma, retreated into solitude, transcribing feverishly in a notebook akin to Weston's, as an antique mirror fragment adorned her wall, its surface rippling in unseen tides. Story 12. The new occupants believed it was merely peeling wallpaper. Yet, as they delicately removed each layer, a cryptic tale unfolded. Inked on the walls, repeated incessantly, was a single name. The name, Alina Winters, sprawled across every surface, etched in a frantic, uneven scrawl. It bore no connection to the previous residents, nor did it exist in any official documents. However, a cursory online search unveiled a solitary result, a cold case of a missing person from decades past. And the chilling twist, the woman in the faded photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to the individual who had sold them the house. Michael and Sarah Klein hadn't planned on refurbishing the Victorian-era dwelling right away. The alluring old abode had come at a surprisingly modest price, and the former owner, a reserved, refined woman with silver-streaked dark locks, had appeared eager to part ways, mentioning a cross-country relocation. The couple found themselves captivated by the dwelling's charisma, with its intricate woodwork and soaring ceilings whispering tales of a bygone era. It all commenced with a modest water stain in the primary bedroom. Sarah observed a yellowing discoloration seeping through the floral wallpaper. Upon Michael's gentle prodding, the paper yielded to reveal yet another layer beneath. Intrigued, they gingerly peeled away the damaged section. The initial layer unveiled outdated paisley motifs harkening back to the 1970s. Beneath that, striped paper from an earlier epoch. However, it was the third layer down that held an unexpected surprise. Words. Dark ink against faded beige parchment. Not random scrawls, but a name, Alina Winters, repeated ad infinitum. The handwriting growing increasingly frantic and erratic across the expanse. "Who is Alina Winters?" Sarah murmured, her fingers trailing the manic script. The revelation unsettled them both. That evening, Michael sat at the kitchen island, laptop aglow, delving into property records. The house had changed ownership multiple times throughout the years, yet no trace of Alina Winters surfaced in any documentation. The woman who had handed them the keys was registered as Margaret Cavendish. Sarah joined him, clutching a mug of coffee. Try searching just the name. The internet quest bore sparse fruits until they stumbled upon an archived newspaper clipping, digitized from microfilm. Alina Winters, age 27, reported missing during wintertime. The monochrome photograph depicted a young woman with dark tresses and distinct eyes mirroring those of Margaret Cavendish, the house's former owner. "This article dates back 30 years, Michael murmured, his voice a mere whisper over the hum of the fridge. Margaret would be the right age now, but Sarah swallowed hard. The missing woman never received closure, no body recovered, no suspects identified. Their intrigue blossomed into an all-consuming fixation. Sarah reached out to the previous occupants, retracing steps through county archives. Renovations ground to a halt as they dedicated evenings to their impromptu investigation. They uncovered that Margaret Cavendish had held ownership of the property for a mere 7 months before passing the torch, a peculiar occurrence given the extensive paperwork and inspections they had undergone. The retired detective assigned to the cold case had long since bid farewell to the force. When Michael managed to track him down, the man immediately recollected the inquiry. His voice crackled over the speakerphone as he recounted the details. Alina Winters was reported missing by her roommate, no signs of struggle at her residence. Her vehicle discovered abandoned near the highway. The case swiftly went cold, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play, simply vanished. Michael hesitated before inquiring, "Did you ever interview a Margaret Cavendish?" Silence weighed heavily on the line. "No, the name doesn't ring a bell. Why?" Upon sharing their findings and presenting photos of both women side by side, the retired detective pledged to make inquiries. Days later, a current detective reached out, seeking permission to scrutinize the wall, their once peaceful abode transformed into an active crime scene. Forensic units meticulously documented and extracted sections of the wallpaper. Analysis pinpointed the ink's age to around 30 years. Handwriting analysts compared the wall inscriptions to samples of Alina's penmanship from ancient diaries provided by her kin. The outcomes remained inconclusive. Meanwhile, Sarah stumbled upon a concealed compartment beneath the bedroom closet's floorboards. Within rested a driver's license belonging to Alina Winters, alongside various other identification cards bearing different aliases. Each bore the same visage with subtle discrepancies: hair hues, spectacles, expressions. The final ID, Margaret Cavendish, aligned with their home's vendor. When authorities endeavored to locate Margaret using the forwarding address she had supplied, they encountered a dead end. Her phone number had been disconnected. The bank account that received their payment had been shut down. Margaret Cavendish had vanished, much akin to Alina Winters decades earlier. Then came the revelation that reshaped the inquiry entirely. DNA tests conducted on hair strands retrieved from deep within the wall cavity matched Alina Winters. However, fingerprints lifted from the writings corresponded to an entirely different profile, one belonging to a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge, who had been institutionalized shortly after Alina's disappearance. Rebecca Eldridge had been diagnosed with severe dissociative identity disorder. Throughout the years, she had absconded from the institution on multiple occasions. Her medical records unveiled a chilling detail. One of her documented alter egos had christened herself Alina. The investigation unveiled that Rebecca had been Alina's childhood companion, fixated on her to the point of imitation. When Alina rebuffed her increasingly unsettling advances, something within Rebecca fractured. She had assumed Alina's identity literally and metaphorically, and fabricated an intricate tapestry of personas to perpetuate the charade. The inscribed name symbolized Rebecca's desperate bid to retain a grasp on reality, to recollect her true self beneath the assumed facades. The wall had metamorphosed into both a confession and a prison, a tangible reflection of her shattered psyche. Sarah and Michael observed from their front porch as forensic teams meticulously excavated designated sections of their backyard, guided by ground-penetrating radar that had detected anomalies beneath the earth. The cold case had abruptly heated up. The remains unearthed from beneath the garden belonged to Alina Winters. Rebecca Eldridge, known to Michael and Sarah as Margaret Cavendish, was eventually apprehended while attempting to flee the country under yet another alias. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, the persona masquerading as Margaret crumbled, and another surfaced, one who admitted to the fatal act committed in a jealous frenzy. The names on the wall had served as both a tribute and an acknowledgement of guilt, inscribed by a fractured psyche striving to cling to shreds of verity against its own will. For Alina's family, justice arrived 3 decades belatedly. For Michael and Sarah, their envisioned sanctuary became notorious, a footnote in the annals of true crime, forever remembered as the residence where the walls themselves bore witness to a tragedy. Story 13. In the stillness of the night, a pocket dial echoed through the empty corridors of the abandoned house. Static and muffled sounds danced in the air, almost imperceptible. The operator, on the verge of dismissing it as a mere glitch, froze as a voice emerged from the chaos. A woman's voice, laced with fear and urgency, whispered into the void, "He's here." The words hung hauntingly before being swallowed by silence. Detective Morgan Reed stood in the dimly lit kitchen, the dust swirling in the faint light filtering through the windows. Before her on the counter sat a phone, its screen softly glowing. It was a relic of the past, untouched by human hands for years. The call had been made mere minutes ago, yet the house bore no signs of intrusion, no evidence of disturbance. The property had once belonged to the Sullivans, a family torn apart by tragedy. A fire had ravaged the west wing, forcing them to flee, leaving the house to decay in solitude. The caretaker swore by the emptiness of the place, claiming no one had trespassed in years. As Detective Reed replayed the cryptic message for the 5th time, a chill crept down her spine. The voice, laden with desperation and impossibility, whispered secrets that defied logic. The phone, once belonging to Catherine Sullivan, lay at the heart of the mystery. A deceased woman's device, making calls from a house frozen in time. Forensic analysis yielded no answers. The phone held no fingerprints but bore traces of a presence that could not be identified. No footprints marred the dust, no signs of life disturbed the stillness of the abandoned dwelling. It was as though the call had materialized out of thin air, a ghostly echo from the past. The recording, a mere 11 seconds of static and breath, became the focal point of their investigation. Voice analysis confirmed the identity of the caller, Catherine Sullivan, with 98% certainty. The timestamp revealed a chilling truth: the call had occurred at the exact moment of Catherine's tragic demise 3 years prior. Interviews with Catherine's loved ones uncovered a tangled web of secrets. Her father remarried and bewildered her mother, haunted by the ghostly whisper of her daughter's voice. And then there was Mark Jennings, Catherine's boyfriend at the time of her death, whose alibi held strong, yet whose presence lingered like a shadow over the investigation. A breakthrough came in the form of a journal unearthed from Catherine's belongings. Its pages chronicled a descent into darkness, a relationship marred by control and fear. The final entry, a plea for help in a sea of despair, hinted at a sinister truth lurking beneath the surface. Confronted with the damning evidence, Mark's facade crumbled. His alibi shattered, his lies laid bare. The buried phone, unearthed from the depths of the earth, told a story of betrayal and violence, of a life cut short by a man consumed by darkness. As the truth unfurled, a pattern emerged. Mark's sinister legacy extended beyond Catherine, reaching other unsuspecting victims. His reign of terror, disguised as accidents, left a trail of devastation in its wake. In a chilling twist of fate, the ghostly call led detectives to the very heart of the darkness. Mark, the mastermind behind the charade, sat in silent contemplation, his eyes fixed on a phone identical to Catherine's, his delusions of control shattered by the cold reality of justice. As the gavel fell, sealing Mark's fate, a sense of closure washed over Catherine's loved ones. The journal, clutched tightly to her mother's chest, bore witness to a daughter's bravery in the face of evil. Justice, not through supernatural means, but through the unwavering voice of the victim, echoed through the halls of the abandoned house. And so the phone now rests in the evidence locker, a silent sentinel of a harrowing tale. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, officers swear they hear it ring, a phantom echo of a life lost but not forgotten. Catherine's story lives on, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a reminder that even in death, voices can still be heard. Story 14. In the quiet depths of the attic, buried beneath layers of forgotten memories and dusty relics, lay an old box. It had weathered the passage of time, a silent witness to the comings and goings of the house's previous inhabitants. Among its contents were faded Polaroids, snapshots frozen in moments of ordinary joy, a birthday celebration, a family gathering, innocent scenes captured on film. But one photograph stood out from the rest, shrouded in an eerie mystery that beckoned to be unraveled. As Rebecca unearthed the last photo from the depths of the box, a chill crept up her spine, sending tremors through her fingers. The image depicted her own living room, the familiar couch, the familiar curtains, yet the family captured within its frame was not hers. And there, lurking in the shadows of the hallway behind them, stood a figure, a man watching, his presence barely discernible in the dim light. Descending the creaking wooden steps, Rebecca felt the weight of the house pressing down on her, suffocating in its emptiness. Placing the photograph on the kitchen counter, she gazed at it under the harsh glare of fluorescent light. The uncanny resemblance between her home and the unknown family in the picture was undeniable, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Enter Detective Morgan, clad in a weathered leather jacket, his gaze sharp and unwavering. With a methodical precision, he examined the Polaroid, his gloved finger tracing its edges before flipping it over to reveal a blank back. Questions hung heavy in the air as he inquired about the previous owners, the elusive Nelsons, who had sold the house and vanished into the shadows of relocation. The investigation unfolded quietly, tracing back through the layers of time and ownership. The Nelsons led to the Crawfords to the Mornos, a web of transient residents woven into the fabric of the house's history. But it was the Sutherlands who held the key, a family that had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. Forensic analysis shed light on the mysterious photograph, its details meticulously examined for clues. The figure in the hallway remained a specter, tall and malevolent, a silent observer frozen in time. And as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a pattern emerged, a pattern of families vanishing after a year of residence, leaving behind no trace of their existence. Delving deeper into the house's dark past, Detective Morgan uncovered the legacy of Samuel Whitfield, the enigmatic architect who had built the dwelling. A man shrouded in mystery, his presence lingered in the shadows, his connection to the disappearances becoming ever more apparent. Beneath the cold concrete of the basement, a grim discovery awaited the preserved remains of the missing families, a macabre tableau frozen in time. Among their possessions lay a camera, the same camera that had captured their final moments, a silent witness to their fate. As Rebecca sought refuge in a hotel under police protection, a sense of unease settled over her. The night was pierced by the ring of a phone, the sound of breathing on the other end, followed by the mechanical whir of a Polaroid camera. The darkness held its secrets close, whispering of watchers in the shadows, of unseen eyes that followed her every move. The house stood silent, its windows dark, its walls holding the echoes of the past. Samuel Whitfield remained a phantom, a ghostly presence haunting the halls of memory, and somewhere in the quiet depths of a hidden room, photographs developed, capturing new families, new homes, new mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The truth remained elusive, slipping through the cracks of time and memory, a riddle waiting to be solved by those brave enough to seek it. And as the night stretched on, the house stood as a silent sentinel, its secrets buried deep within its walls, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to venture into its depths. Story 15. The parcel arrived mysteriously, devoid of any traceable information, a plain cardboard box, faintly damp from the morning mist. It wasn't intended for Sarah Miller. The address matched, but the name did not. She hesitated, a flicker of curiosity igniting within her. Despite the urge to disregard the package, she succumbed to its enigmatic allure. With a sense of trepidation, she peeled away the tape, anticipating mundane contents like books or clothing. To her surprise, nestled inside was a VHS tape accompanied by a solitary sticky note that read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, sensing an inexplicable weight to it, as though burdened with the gravity of forbidden knowledge. Her fingertips traced the worn edges, feeling the imperfections etched into the casing. The handwritten note bore the mark of urgency, each stroke pressed with purpose against the paper. Meanwhile, the suburban backdrop carried on with its routine symphony, the distant bark of a dog, the laughter of children playing, the drone of a lawnmower in the distance. Unaware of the clandestine delivery that had just transpired. Bringing the package inside, Sarah placed it on her kitchen counter, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The name Daniel Whitaker held no significance to her. Having resided in the house for nearly 4 years, she had never received mail for someone by that name. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had long departed to be closer to family. Curiosity warred with unease as she glanced at her antiquated VCR, a relic of nostalgia. There was something about the tape that beckoned to her, a mystery shrouded in worn plastic. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into the machine. Static initially dominated the screen, gradually sharpening into focus. A dimly lit room materialized, illuminated by a solitary lamp. The camera angle was askew, lending an air of haste to the scene. A man sat in a wooden chair, his features initially obscured by shadows. "My name is Daniel Whitaker." His voice, quiet yet resolute, filled the room. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, which means they will find me as well." Leaning closer, he revealed a countenance marked by exhaustion and vigilance, sunken eyes, stubble adorning his face, hair unkempt. "I did not commit the crime. I need you to believe that. They have planted evidence against me, my fingerprints, my DNA, despite never coming into contact with her." As Daniel adjusted the camera, the room's starkness came into view: bare walls, minimal furnishings, the dwelling of one prepared to flee at a moment's notice. "They fabricated everything. The official report will claim I knew her, that we quarreled, that witnesses heard us argue. None of it is true. I only saw Catherine Walsh for the first time on the news." His voice wavered. "Deceased, murdered in her own home, and yet my DNA was present at the crime scene." Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth of its kind to surface. 5 tapes, 5 disparate recipients, all bearing the desperate plea of Daniel Whitaker, an individual officially accused of Catherine Walsh's murder. A man who had vanished without a trace upon the discovery of her lifeless body. Initially, the Walsh case appeared straightforward: a young professional woman found strangled in her residence. No signs of forced entry, indications of a struggle, and DNA evidence pointing unequivocally to Whitaker, his fingerprints already cataloged from a prior minor infraction. Eyewitnesses reported sightings of a man resembling him near her home in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Cell phone records placed him in the vicinity on the fateful night. A clear-cut case. Until the enigmatic tapes emerged. The tapes add complexity, Detective Ramirez narrated into her recorder while updating her case notes. Whitaker is either orchestrating an intricate diversion or unveiling something far more sinister. Surveying her evidence board photos of a smiling Catherine Walsh at a corporate function, grisly crime scene images too distressing to linger on, maps pinpointing the delivery locations of the parcels, and at the heart, Daniel Whitaker's driver's license photo. His eyes seemed to implore her for understanding. The investigation took an unforeseen turn as Ramirez unearthed Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against PharmaCorp, a formidable pharmaceutical entity with government affiliations. Walsh had stumbled upon irregularities in their clinical trial data, evidence of concealed side effects in a swiftly advancing drug. A former colleague, glancing anxiously toward the door during an interview, divulged Catherine was gearing up to testify. She possessed documentation, evidence proving top executives were privy to the issues and chose to bury them. The trial was imminent. As Ramirez delved deeper, she encountered anomalies in the evidence. The DNA traces seemed almost too meticulously placed, discovered in locations incongruous with the crime. Witness statements regarding Whitaker appeared rehearsed, echoing across multiple testimonies. Most troubling of all, surveillance footage from nearby establishments inexplicably corrupted within the critical time frame surrounding the murder. 3 days subsequent to the tape's delivery, Sarah Miller received a second package. This time it contained a trove of documents, clinical trial reports, internal correspondences, email transcripts, all originating from PharmaCorp and bearing Catherine Walsh's digital signature. Each piece of evidence substantiated her claims. The focus of the investigation shifted as Detective Ramirez connected with other recipients of the enigmatic tapes, piecing together Whitaker's trail of breadcrumbs. Having worked in IT security for a contractor servicing PharmaCorp systems, Whitaker had never crossed paths with Catherine, but he had chanced upon her name flagged in an atypical security protocol he was not meant to access. They had her under surveillance, Whitaker revealed in a subsequent tape that surfaced. I saw the directives within the system. They were aware she was amassing evidence. Then suddenly, I found myself locked out of the network. The following day, she was gone, and I was inexplicably framed. The breakthrough came when Sarah Miller discerned a crucial detail on her copy of the tape that had eluded others. A reflection in a window behind Whitaker disclosed a row of storage units. Collaborating with Detective Ramirez, they identified the precise location. Inside Unit 217, a wealth of evidence awaited them: Whitaker's journal chronicling the conspiracy, Catherine's original files, and most damningly, meticulous strategies for incriminating Whitaker, inscribed in the hand of PharmaCorp's head of security, a former law enforcement officer with access to evidence protocols. Justice did not manifest through a dramatic arrest, but through the gradual accumulation of irrefutable evidence. 3 executives faced indictment. The head of security confessed, striking a deal to testify against his superiors. The drug in question was withdrawn from consideration for market release. Emerging from seclusion, Daniel Whitaker, emaciated and altered by his fugitive existence, saw the charges against him dropped. However, the ordeal had left an indelible mark on him. Sarah Miller encountered him once more when he arrived to retrieve his tape. Engaging in a brief exchange on her porch, the site where the enigmatic parcel had first appeared, she queried, "Why me? Why send it to my address?" His weary gaze met hers. "The algorithm chose you. I needed individuals unconnected to either Catherine or myself, individuals beyond their surveillance, individuals who might retain faith in their judgment amidst the allegations of my guilt." The erstwhile suspect and inadvertent witness stood in contemplative silence, pondering the tenuous boundary between justice and manufactured deceit. At length, Sarah spoke. The incorrect address turned out to be precisely the correct one. The VHS tapes were cataloged as evidence, a tangible reminder that truth sometimes arrives in unanticipated packages, bearing unfamiliar names, awaiting a curious soul to unveil its secrets. Story 16. The gentle current whispered softly that morning, the water mirroring the sky in its tranquil stillness. The fisherman's eyes drifted lazily until they caught sight of an unusual sight, a solitary suitcase bobbing near the shore. Initially dismissing it as discarded clothing, a pungent odor wafted towards him as he approached. The stench was suffocating, unmistakable, lingering in the air like a haunting melody. The case was bound in chains, its metal edges kissed by rust from exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, they were met not with garments, but with a macabre discovery: locks of hair, fingers frozen in a silent plea. Nestled at the bottom, a cryptic note sent shivers down their spines. This isn't the first. Detective Sarah Mercer, her demeanor composed yet eyes betraying a deep unease, observed the grim tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, had dark locks and pallid skin, now marred by the touch of water. The medical examiner meticulously catalogued every detail, a somber prelude to the removal of the body. What struck Mercer amidst the somber scene was not just the gruesome method of disposal, but the eerie reverence with which the victim had been prepared: manicured nails, recently styled hair, adorned in opulent attire. "She wasn't taken here," Mercer murmured, her gaze fixed on the rippling water caressing the muddy banks. "She was readied, presented." The victim was identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her dealings in luxurious properties. Divorced, childless, she led a solitary life in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues painted a portrait of a woman driven, meticulous, and fiercely private. Her sudden disappearance, reported by her concerned assistant, coincided with a pivotal showing. She had missed an event that promised her the largest commission of her career. Investigators meticulously combed through Walsh's sleek, modernist abode. Every facet gleamed with perfection, almost unnaturally so. Designer furnishings stood in impeccable arrangement, untouched by the passage of time. The kitchen revealed meticulously labeled meals, organized by the day. In her closet, clothes hung in color-coordinated harmony, shoes nestled in protective sheaths. Yet a single anomaly caught their attention: a slightly ajar drawer in her home office. Within, a leather-bound journal awaited discovery. The final entry sent a chill down their spines. "He's watching again. Same car, different plates." A digital excavation of Walsh's online footprint unveiled a disconcerting pattern: a deluge of messages from untraceable accounts, all bearing the ominous phrase, "I see your perfection." Each missive arrived like clockwork, a haunting echo of unseen eyes surveilling her every move. Her search history hinted at a growing paranoia, a quest for security systems and self-defense mechanisms. Mercer discerned a troubling connection between these clues and the meticulous presentation of the victim's body. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she confided to her partner. "This is not a crime of passion, but of meticulous intent, a ritual cloaked in darkness." A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: a local pawnbroker who recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among his wares. The man who had pawned it bore a nondescript facade: Michael Linden, a solitary maintenance worker. Surveillance footage revealed his frequent visits to Walsh's residence, sometimes laden with maintenance tools, other times empty-handed, always lurking during her absences, showcasing a chilling familiarity with her routines. A search of Linden's modest dwelling unearthed the chilling tableau walls adorned with surreptitious snapshots of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, captured unawares. Some portraits were defaced with crimson crosses. Walsh, it appeared, was but one of his tragic muses. Concealed behind a concealed panel in his closet, lay a shrine of sorts, a macabre collection of personal items from each victim meticulously displayed. Strands of hair, lipstick-stained tissues, mundane receipts, all bearing witness to his twisted fixation. The interrogation room turned frigid as Lyndon was brought in for questioning. His demeanor betrayed no hint of malice, his words devoid of emotion. They were flawed, he intoned, his voice a monotone mask. They projected perfection, but I saw through their facade. Catherine's desk was always in disarray. Her lipstick missed a mark. Her perfection was a charade. The search for the victims referenced in his cryptic note led investigators to remote locales, where two more suitcases surfaced, each cradling a woman akin to Walsh in appearance, both real estate agents who peddled an image of impeccable precision. As Lyndon faced trial, his impassive visage belied the horrors he had wrought. A meticulous predator, he had stalked his victims with ruthless precision, infiltrating their lives, shaping their fates. Families of the fallen watched in silent sorrow as the gavel sentenced Lyndon to a life devoid of freedom, the darkness within him forever contained. For Detective Mercer, the case concluded officially, yet tendrils of doubt lingered. What inner turmoil propelled Lyndon's fixation on these specific women? What imperfections within himself did he seek to expunge through his gruesome artistry? The river meandered along its timeless course, waters whispering secrets untold. Within the precinct, upon Mercer's desk, lay copies of Lyndon's chilling chronicles, a reminder that in the ordinary beats the heart of darkness, concealed behind masks of normalcy. Sometimes the most perilous predators are those who dwell in plain sight, their gaze ever watchful, awaiting the moment of revelation. Story 17, The Enigmatic Doll. In a forgotten corner of the attic, hidden beneath a worn blanket, they stumbled upon it. A porcelain doll, its delicate features showing the wear of age, with painted blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets untold. Sarah and Michael, a young couple who had recently acquired the old Victorian house, were puzzled by the doll's presence. They dismissed it as just another piece of forgotten history, a relic of the past. That night, a subtle shift in the air unsettled them as they retired to bed. The silence seemed to stretch endlessly, wrapping around them like a heavy shroud. And when morning broke, the doll was no longer in the attic. It now sat silently at the foot of their bed, its unblinking gaze fixed upon them. The house they had purchased at auction had whispered tales of its troubled past, but they had been drawn to its allure, unaware of the dark forces that dwelled within. Detective Rachel Winters, a seasoned investigator, was summoned to the scene on a crisp autumn morning where a chilling tableau awaited her. In the master bedroom, the female victim lay in a grotesque pose, her eyes wide with terror. Nearby, the male victim appeared as if in a desperate attempt to flee, frozen in a moment of fear. The scene was pristine, devoid of any signs of struggle or forced entry, leaving the detective to ponder the meticulous precision of the crime. As Detective Winters delved deeper into the investigation, a sense of unease pervaded the once peaceful neighborhood. Accounts from neighbors spoke of shadows flitting past windows and eerie laughter echoing through the night, adding layers of mystery to the unfolding tragedy. Forensic analysis revealed traces of antique fabrics throughout the house, fibers that hinted at a connection to the doll found by Sarah and Michael. But the absence of any tangible evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA from an intruder, only deepened the enigma surrounding the case. Delving into the house's history, Detective Winters uncovered a chilling pattern of unexplained deaths spanning decades. Each previous owner had met a tragic end, their demise shrouded in inexplicable circumstances that defied conventional explanation. A newspaper clipping from years past led the detective to a disturbing revelation: a reclusive doll maker who had once resided in the house, his creations rumored to hold a sinister secret. The final doll he crafted, a haunting replica of his deceased daughter, bore an uncanny resemblance to the doll found by Sarah and Michael. As the investigation unfolded, a sinister presence seemed to weave through the very walls of the house. Old photographs hinted at the doll's malevolent nature, its eerie ability to shift positions between frames, a silent harbinger of impending doom. Interviews with a distant relative of the doll maker unveiled dark whispers of arcane rituals and forbidden knowledge, hinting at the doll's origins rooted in the macabre. The line between myth and reality blurred as the detective delved deeper into the tangled web of secrets that bound the doll to its tragic legacy. But as the case reached a standstill, with no logical explanation in sight, the doll vanished from police custody, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of dread. Detective Winters, haunted by the inexplicable events, chose to retire, taking with her a burden of secrets that would forever remain unsolved. The house changed hands once more, its dark history veiled in shadows. The attic, now empty save for a forgotten blanket, bore silent witness to the mysteries that lay buried within its walls. And on quiet nights, whispers of a spectral presence lingered, a ghostly reminder of the enigmatic doll that had eluded capture, forever haunting the depths of the old Victorian house. Story 18. The vacant apartment held secrets whispered in the shadows, unseen by the passing days. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, their expectations were low, perhaps a layer of dust, a forgotten relic here or there. But one door stood defiant, its secrets locked away from prying eyes. A closet, sealed from within, harboring a mystery that refused to be ignored. With a determined push, the landlord broke the barrier, unleashing a wave of unease upon the unsuspecting tenants. Instead of musty coats or discarded trinkets, the closet revealed a haunting truth. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, jagged lines of desperation. And in the dim corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator of the uncanny, felt a chill creep down her spine as she surveyed the scene. It wasn't the absence of blood or violence that unsettled her, but the silent echoes of a trapped soul clawing for freedom. Forensics, now, she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the haunting marks with his camera, and fetch me the records of the previous tenant. The cryptic message on the phone whispered ominous truths. I know what you did. The landlord, a man shrouded in nervous perspiration, shared fragments of the past. A quiet young woman vanished without a trace, leaving rent unpaid. She kept to herself. Left 6 moons ago, he offered, his eyes darting away from the closet's gaping maw. No trouble stirred. Forensic analysis unraveled a tapestry of horror within the confines of the closet. Blood samples intertwined with the scratches, painting a grim portrait of struggle and solitude. Most traces belonged to a single soul, presumably the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell, a young woman of 28, reported absent from her daily life. Yet amidst the genetic tapestry, 2 anomalies emerged. One identity remained a mystery in the databases. The other bore the mark of a man declared deceased for 2 cycles of the seasons. This cannot be, Shaw murmured, disbelief etched upon her features as she pored over the findings. Derek Mercer, a man of past violence, supposedly lost to the world in a tragic accident, now left his mark in the shadows of Emma's sanctuary. The apartment whispered tales of interrupted existence, unopened letters, a solitary coffee mug in neglect, a bed meticulously arranged. Emma's phone records hinted at a narrative of silence, calls with her sister dwindling into nothingness, punctuated by a flurry of unknown numbers in her final days. The sister speaks of a mysterious lover, Officer Reed disclosed, a man unnamed, described as intense and private. Surveillance footage, a silent observer of lives entwined, captured Emma's nocturnal homecoming, followed by a shadowed figure with a concealed countenance. The pieces aligned when latent fingerprints of Derek Mercer graced the closet's doorknob from within. He staged his demise, Shaw concluded, a flicker of understanding piercing the shadows. But for what purpose, and what binds him to Emma's fate? The enigma deepened as the unknown DNA sample led to another enigma, a vanished soul, Lynette Porter, lost to the void 3 cycles of the moon prior. Her essence lingered in the testimonies of neighbors who glimpsed her visits to Emma's abode. A mosaic of truth emerged as Shaw delved into the labyrinth of surveillance tapes, tracing the phantom footsteps of Derek Mercer's deception. Each clue unfurled like a macabre tapestry, leading the investigators to a secluded domain owned by Mercer's kin. Behind stout cellar doors, they unearthed Lynette Porter, frail but breathing, a specter of the past trapped in echoes of Emma's confinement. "He made me witness," Lynette murmured, her gaze vacant, haunted by the specter of a man consumed by shadows. "He taught me the price of defiance in the abyss." A trove of evidence unfurled, journals unraveled Mercer's obsession with dominion, photographs capturing echoes of Emma and Lynette, and most damning, videos documenting Emma's descent into darkness. He feared her words, his voice echoed through the recording, a harbinger of malevolence. "No one speaks of our pact, none shall reveal my truths." The pursuit of Derek Mercer spanned realms of authority, a hunt that transcended borders and boundaries. As the man of shadows vanished into the night, forensic sages crafted a portrait that chilled the marrow of truth seekers. Mercer's desires transcended mere mortality. He craved the agony of captivity, the slow erosion of hope in the crucible of seclusion. Amidst the whispers of shadows, his capture at a bus terminal brought a sliver of closure, a glimpse into the abyss that consumed his essence. Within his satchel lay tools of dread, a coil of duct tape, a blade honed for malice, and a fragment of Emma's tale preserved in print. During the Inquisition, Mercer bore a mask of serenity, a facade of tranquility that veiled a heart steeped in shadows. She penned that missive herself, he professed of the phone's cryptic message. She sought salvation, but redemption eluded her grasp. The trial unraveled the tapestry of deception Mercer had spun, weaving a web of deceit through the annals of existence. For years he had lurked in the shadows, preying on echoes of his first victim. Emma's remains eluded discovery, lost to the confines of a closet that whispered of her final moments. The spectral message on the phone stood as her final testament, a plea for justice etched in digital ink, a legacy of shadows in the wake of her vanquisher. The jury's deliberation lasted but a breath before sealing Mercer's fate with a verdict of guilt on all counts. As the sentence of eternal solitude echoed through the chamber, Mercer's lips curled in a semblance of satisfaction, a flicker of understanding in the depths of his darkened soul. Amidst the echoes of judgment, Lynette Porter's voice pierced the silence, a beacon of resilience amidst the shadows. "He trapped us in the void because his essence dwells within darkness," her words resonated in the hallowed halls of justice. "While he languishes in shadow, I shall bask in the light." The saga reshaped the protocols of the department, illuminating the shadows that lurked within the mundane. Detective Shaw kept the closet's portal within her sanctum, a silent sentinel of reminders that sometimes the most harrowing tales are etched not in crimson, but in the silent screams of souls yearning for release. Story 19. The inn was modest, outdated, a transient haven for weary travelers seeking only a brief respite. A peculiar air lingered as the clerk slid the key across the counter, his gaze weighted with unspoken warnings. Just avoid the final door on the left, his words barely audible. Intrigue tugged at her curiosity. That evening, navigating the shadowed corridor, she paused before the ominous door. The handle chilled her touch. At first glance, it mirrored its neighbors, yet a faint breath whispered from within as she pressed her ear to the wood. Detective Morgan Reed rubbed the weariness from her eyes, slipping beneath the tape sealing off the crime scene. The metallic tang of blood greeted her, saturating the threadbare carpet with a darkness that mirrored the grim truth within. Amidst pristine surroundings, a ghastly sight unfolded, the lifeless form of a woman sprawled in a macabre display. Blonde locks splayed like a celestial crown, eyes fixed on an unseen horror. Kneeling beside the victim, Reed absorbed the sterile efficiency of the forensic technician as he documented the scene, another grim chapter in a haunting series. Third one this season, he murmured, his tone bereft of emotion, a pattern etched in tragedy. The victim's elegant attire clashed with the motel's humble facade, a juxtaposition that hinted at a deeper motive. The hotel manager lingered, a ghostly specter at the threshold, his pallor betraying his shock. She arrived alone, paid in cash. I never imagined, his voice faltered. The maid stumbled upon her during routine cleaning. Reed surveyed the room, noting the absence of forced entry, the lack of defensive wounds. A chilling realization, the victim had welcomed her demise. Back at headquarters, Reed pinned photographs to the board, a macabre triptych of women eerily similar. Speculation swirled, the press amplifying whispers of a predator lurking in the shadows. Autopsies in, Detective Hayes announced, laying out the findings. Strangulation manual, no trace of DNA under her nails, no signs of assault. Reed frowned, sensing a personal vendetta woven into the tapestry of death. Days blurred into nights as the investigation deepened, each lead a dead end. Surveillance footage yielded no answers, the victim, Elaine Werner, shrouded in mystery. Colleagues painted a portrait of a meticulous professional, her choice of lodging a baffling enigma. A breakthrough emerged during a tense interview with Werner's sister, unearthing a clandestine liaison with a shadowy figure from her workplace, known only as C. The focus shifted to Charles Emerson, a senior executive whose polished facade crumbled under Reed's scrutiny. A trail of evidence led to his door, revealing a twisted web of deceit and obsession. Fiber by fiber, print by print, the truth unfurled, a calculated predator preying on echoes of his past. In the interrogation room, Emerson's facade shattered, revealing a void where remorse should reside. His chilling confession echoed through the courtroom, sealing his fate in a trial that captivated a nation. Justice served, yet for Reed, the case lingered like a haunting melody, a reminder that some doors once opened revealed depths of darkness that defy comprehension. The media dubbed it the door on the left case, a cautionary tale dissected by psychologists and armchair detectives alike. Yet for Reed, the echoes of that fateful night reverberated down hotel corridors, a reminder that behind each door lies a story untold, a secret waiting to exhale. And in the evidence locker, 3 keys lay dormant, silent witnesses to a chapter of darkness that time could never erase. Story 20. The old house had sat silent for years, a relic of memories long faded. Whispers from the neighbors spoke of a young woman who vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that echoed through the empty rooms. When the new occupants crossed the threshold, they found a peculiar sight, a bedroom locked from within, as if time itself had stood still. With a creak and a groan, the door yielded to their persistence, revealing a space frozen in solitude. The air hung heavy with neglect, the faint scent of dust mingling with an elusive something that lingered, unspoken. In the stillness they beheld an unsettling tableau. The bed stood neatly made, untouched by time's relentless march. The mirror gleamed, devoid of smudges or reflections, and on the desk a solitary candle stood vigil, its flame long extinguished, leaving behind a pool of wax frozen in time, a silent witness to forgotten moments. But it was the notebook that beckoned, a vessel of secrets waiting to be unfurled. Detective Morgan, a seeker of truths shrouded in shadows, perused the notebook's whispered confessions as dust motes danced in the dim light. Each page bore the mark of Elise Winters, a young soul lost to the mists of mystery. Her words, penned with delicate precision, wove a tale of intrigue and trepidation, leading inexorably to the final entry etched with a tremor of fear. "I know he's watching me tonight," the ink whispered, a spectral echo of a voice long silenced. "If something happens, know it wasn't chance." The detective's keen eyes scanned the room, seeking clues in the silence that enveloped them. The landlord, a specter of unease, lingered in the doorway, a silent sentinel to the enigma that unfolded before them. Elise, once a paralegal ensnared in a web of corporate deceit, had uncovered truths best left buried, her words etched in ink and hidden whispers. As the investigation delved deeper, a tapestry of deception unfurled, a tapestry woven with threads of greed and betrayal. Elise's meticulous nature, her dedication to uncovering the shadows that lurked within the firm of Harriman and Associates, painted a portrait of a woman on the brink of revelation. The photographs whispered of a life interrupted, of a soul ensnared in a dance of shadows and light. The bedroom, a silent witness to the unfolding drama, held its secrets close, revealing nothing of the turmoil that had transpired within its walls. But beneath the veneer of normalcy, a storm brewed, a storm of corruption and malice that threatened to consume all in its path. In the quiet hours of investigation, hidden truths came to light, the whisper of a hidden passageway, a key to a vault of secrets long buried. The revelations painted a portrait of a world tainted by greed, of lives lost to the machinations of power and privilege. As Detective Morgan unraveled the tapestry of deceit, the shadows receded, revealing a truth long obscured, a truth that echoed through the empty rooms of the house, a testament to the courage of one woman who dared to defy the darkness. In the end, justice prevailed, a beacon of light cutting through the shadows of corruption. Elise's legacy, her unwavering pursuit of truth, stood as a testament to the power of one voice raised in the darkness. The room she never truly left became a shrine to her memory, a silent witness to the triumph of justice over deceit. And so the house stood empty once more, its secrets laid bare for all to see. The whispers of the past lingered in the air, a reminder of the price of silence and the cost of truth. In the stillness of the night, a faint light flickered in the upstairs window, a beacon of remembrance for a soul lost but never forgotten. The house, a sentinel of secrets, stood as a testament to the enduring power of one woman's courage in the face of insurmountable odds. Story 21, The Nursery Whispers. She yearned to refresh the nursery before the little one's arrival. The walls wore a faded blue, holding silent tales within their depths. As she applied the first coat of white paint, something emerged beneath a message, barely discernible at first, then growing sharper, clearer. "Don't let it hear you." Her breath hitched. Stepping back, her gaze fell upon them tiny handprints in the fresh paint, too high for any child to reach. This discovery within the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the genesis of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style home just months earlier, lured by an unbelievably low price. The real estate agent had mentioned only minor cosmetic issues, concealing the property's dark past. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the door, notebook in hand. A woman, her pregnant belly pronounced beneath paint-splattered overalls, answered. Dark circles framed her eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. The trembling of her hands betrayed her unease as she recounted finding the hidden message and handprints. The previous owners vanished abruptly, the woman shared. Neighbors claimed they departed in the dead of night, leaving without a trace. No moving truck, just essentials packed into their car. Detective Klein traversed the historic home, the aged floorboards protesting under her weight. In the nursery, she scrutinized the partially painted wall. The message lingered, a stark reminder of the past, alongside 5 small handprints imprinted in the wet paint, positioned at an adult's shoulder height. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property's records. The house had changed hands 8 times in 3 decades, an unusually high turnover rate. Alarming were the child welfare reports related to 3 of those families. Children spoke of whispers from the walls and a sensation of being watched as they slept. The detective delved further, unearthing construction records and historical documents. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who, childless herself, had operated a small orphanage on the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings referenced 5 children who had gone missing from her care. Authorities of the time presumed they had fled, a common fate for orphans in that era. When Eleanor passed away, renovators discovered a sealed room behind the nursery wall, filled with the belongings of children, tiny shoes, toys, and clothes, but no bodies. The mystery had grown cold, buried in archives. Interviewing former residents, Detective Klein uncovered a chilling pattern. Each family with children reported peculiar incidents, toys rearranged overnight, childish laughter echoing through empty corridors, and crayon drawings materializing on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as figments of imagination until the writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in each retelling. Don't let them find you. Don't make a sound. Don't let it hear you. Always the same script, always unveiled during nursery repainting. A forensic linguist compared the writing to samples from Eleanor Blackwood's journals, and the handprints, identical in size and placement across generations, despite different children residing in the home, added to the intrigue. The investigation took a dark turn when the detective secured permission from the current owners for ground-penetrating radar in the basement. Anomalies in the readings hinted at 5 distinct shapes under the concrete floor, each child-sized. Breaking through the concrete revealed a grim truth. 5 small sets of remains, arranged in a circle, dated back to Eleanor's ownership of the house. Each child wore a pendant with their name engraved, the 5 orphans who had supposedly fled. Luminol sprayed in the nursery unveiled handprints on every wall in the darkness, hidden beneath layers of paint, invisible to the naked eye. Hundreds of them at varying heights, as though the children had tried to escape. Eleanor's journals, retrieved from county archives, exposed her macabre beliefs. She held the conviction that orphaned children possessed unique spiritual energy. By confining them in the secret room, she aimed to harness their life force to prolong her own existence. The children, in a desperate bid for help, etched their warnings into the walls with nails and bits of metal, hoping future residents would uncover their fate. The case concluded with the proper burial of the 5 victims. Their names were finally recorded as murder victims, not runaways. The house remained deserted, the expecting couple refusing to return even for their belongings. Detective Klein finalized her report, including photographs of the luminol-illuminated handprints and the hidden message. Justice was served for the original victims, yet an inexplicable presence lingered in the house, a force reaching out through layers of paint and time. The nursery walls met their end during remediation. but workers reported hearing children's whispers amid the debris. None dared to return after their shift. The house met condemnation. Another cold case sealed in a dusty drawer, a tangible closure alongside metaphysical enigmas left unanswered. The detective retained one haunting image from the case: 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a poignant reminder that certain crimes leave indelible marks, impervious to fresh paint. Story 22. In the quiet stillness of a suburban neighborhood, a peculiar mystery unfolded. It began with a simple brass key, its surface weathered by time, arriving in the mail of a homeowner named Sarah Miller. Wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address, the key seemed out of place, yet strangely familiar to her. Sarah, a retired high school English teacher, sensed an eerie presence surrounding the key. As she tried it in every lock she owned, none yielded to its touch. Perplexed, she placed the key on her coffee table, where an old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime, a sound that hadn't been heard in years. Feeling unsettled, Sarah reported the strange occurrence to the authorities, setting off a chain of events that would unravel a dark and chilling tale. Initially dismissed as a simple mistake by the responding officer, the key's arrival soon revealed itself to be a harbinger of something far more sinister. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition, took on the case. The brass key sat on his desk, a silent enigma waiting to be unraveled. Background checks on Sarah turned up no red flags. She was an ordinary woman with no criminal history, leading a quiet life in the neighborhood. Forensic analysis provided no new leads. The key bore only Sarah's fingerprints, and the envelope revealed no clues except for a generic postmark. But it was when Detective Harmon decided to delve deeper into the key's origins that the case took a dark turn. Running the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database led to a cold case from years ago, a storage unit linked to disturbing evidence of violence against women. The original investigation had hit a dead end, but now, with the key as a crucial piece of evidence, new paths of inquiry emerged. As the investigation progressed, a chilling connection emerged between Sarah and a former neighbor named Harold Jenkins. Jenkins, a man with a shadowy past and a penchant for secrecy, had ties to Sarah through their shared history at the local school. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the question remained: why had Jenkins sent the key to Sarah? The search for Jenkins intensified as investigators uncovered a hidden room filled with identical brass keys, each one a grim marker of a victim's fate. The discovery of human remains behind Jenkins' cabin sent shockwaves through the community, revealing the extent of his heinous crimes. The manhunt for Jenkins reached a fever pitch as authorities closed in on his location. In a final, desperate act, Jenkins took his own life, leaving behind a journal detailing his atrocities and a chilling message for Sarah. The truth of his dark intentions unfolded, shedding light on the depths of darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly ordinary lives. As the community grappled with the aftermath of Jenkins' reign of terror, Sarah found herself unable to return to her home, haunted by the proximity of evil that had brushed against her life. The case of the Keymaster served as a stark reminder of the dangers that can hide behind a facade of normalcy, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Psychological researchers continue to study Jenkins' writings in hopes of preventing similar horrors in the future. And as the keys sit silently in an evidence locker, they serve as a solemn reminder of the lives lost and the darkness that can lurk within the most unassuming of places. Story 23. In the olden days, she avoided the attic, a place of shadows and secrets. but fate intervened when a storm breached the roof, forcing her to confront the forgotten chamber. The attic whispered with the echoes of time, shrouded in dust and veils of cobwebs. Amidst the gloom, nestled in the farthest corner, rested an ancient dollhouse. Its miniature rooms were frozen in time, each item meticulously positioned, as if waiting for life to return. Yet as she gazed into the tiny abode, a shiver crept up her spine. The figures within were not lifeless dolls, but intricately carved replicas of her family, each one a mirror image of reality, except for a chilling detail. Her own figure stood, not seated like the rest, but upright by the attic door. Tracing a trembling finger along the miniature roof, Rebecca Morgan felt the weight of the uncanny discovery. A chill gripped her soul, unrelated to the icy tendrils that crept through the attic's rafters. This dollhouse should not have existed in this place, for this was not her childhood abode, but a temporary dwelling her family had recently inhabited. The unsettling revelation propelled Rebecca to seek help from law enforcement, setting in motion a chain of events that would unravel a tale of obsession and intrusion. Detectives arrived at the suburban home to find a family gripped by fear, refusing to ascend to the attic again. Among them, Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially dismissed their distress as a mere prank or a symptom of disorientation in a new environment. What struck Detective Harmon profoundly was the meticulous detail of the dollhouse, each miniature figure capturing the essence of its real-life counterpart: the father's thinning hair, the son's favorite hoodie, the mother's delicate birthmark. Yet, beyond the eerie resemblance lay a sinister truth revealed by forensic analysis. Fingerprints on the dollhouse did not match those of the family members, hinting at an unknown presence in their midst. More disturbing were the microscopic cameras hidden in the figure's eyes, feeding into a concealed surveillance system beneath the dollhouse. The Morgans' movements were not merely observed, but meticulously recorded, mirroring their daily routines with alarming precision. As the investigation delved deeper, a hidden passage was unearthed behind a false pantry wall, leading to a clandestine chamber where evidence pointed to a long-term inhabitant. Food remnants, water bottles, and a makeshift bed hinted at a silent observer dwelling beneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. The absence of forced entry puzzled investigators, delving into the house's history, revealing a dark past. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had passed away, leaving the property vacant until the son orchestrated its rental to unknowing tenants like the Morgans. Neighbors, oblivious to the hidden occupant, recalled faint lights flickering in the abandoned house, dismissing them as real estate showings. A breakthrough in digital forensics traced the surveillance data to a small apartment across town, unveiling a disturbing truth. The walls were adorned with photographs of various families, including the Morgans, alongside detailed journals chronicling their lives. But the most chilling sight was a workshop filled with unfinished dollhouses, each a haunting replica of homes in the vicinity. The perpetrator, Martin Wells, son of the deceased homeowners, harbored a possessive delusion rooted in a need for control. His intricate surveillance system was a manifestation of his unresolved grief, a bid to reclaim his childhood abode and assert dominance over its inhabitants. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed, admitting to his voyeuristic tendencies as a means of maintaining ownership over the house and its residents. At trial, Wells faced charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, and illegal surveillance, prompting a reevaluation of real estate regulations regarding property disclosures and tenant safety. The judge highlighted the egregious violation the Morgan family endured, condemning Wells for his callous manipulation of their lives. The case left criminologists astounded by the depth of Wells' deception, speculating how many families had unwittingly fallen prey to his voyeuristic schemes. The Morgans, scarred by the ordeal, relocated to a distant haven, haunted by the lingering fear of unseen eyes. Rebecca, in her victim impact statement, confessed to a persistent unease, a fear that somewhere in a hidden corner another dollhouse awaited with a miniature version of herself, forever under watchful eyes. Story 24. The old Polaroid held secrets buried beneath the surface of faded smiles and flickering candles. Among the collection of forgotten birthdays, a chilling discovery awaited the daughter who inherited the box of memories. In the background of each photograph, a mysterious figure lurked, gradually creeping closer with each snapshot. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the enigmatic photos while sorting through her late mother's attic. The box labeled Memories seemed innocuous at first, a nostalgic trip down memory lane. Little did she know, it held a sinister puzzle waiting to be unraveled. At her 7th birthday party, the shadowy figure made his first appearance, a mere outline near the glass door, unnoticed by the joyful revelers. With each subsequent photo, he edged his way into the frame, a ghostly presence lingering just out of sight. Concerned and bewildered, Sarah reached out to her father, hoping for an explanation. But his response was tinged with disbelief, denying the existence of any stranger in the pictures. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah turned to Detective Marcus Reed for assistance. In a dimly lit precinct room, rain tapping against the windows, Sarah laid out the haunting progression of photographs before the detective. As he studied the images, a sense of unease crept over the room, casting shadows across the evidence like a veil of mystery. Despite thorough investigations and interviews with party attendees, the identity of the shadowy figure remained elusive. Facial recognition technology failed to unmask him, his presence carefully evading detection in each frame. The breakthrough came when a computer specialist enhanced the images, revealing hidden details that led to a chilling revelation. The figure bore resemblance to Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a dark past linked to unsolved child abductions. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a sinister connection emerged between the figure in the photos and the long-buried crimes. Keller's presence at the birthday party was no coincidence, but a calculated move in a sinister game of shadows. With newfound evidence in hand, authorities unearthed buried secrets at Keller's former residence, linking him to the disappearances of missing children over the years. The shadows of the past began to dissipate, shedding light on the dark truth hidden within the family photos. Alone in her apartment, Sarah grappled with the weight of the revelations, the ghosts of the past finally brought to justice. The figure in the photos, once a spectral presence haunting her memories, now stood exposed for the horrors he had committed. As she packed away the photos, each frame a window into a nightmare long forgotten, Sarah pondered the chilling reality of hidden figures moving through time unseen, their malevolent presence etched in the fabric of family celebrations. And as she closed the lid on the box of memories, she knew that some shadows were meant to be exposed, even if they lurked just beyond the reach of the naked eye. Story 25. In the midst of renovations, strange relics of the past often come to light. Old newspapers, shattered trinkets, faded photographs once treasured. Yet when Sarah and Michael lifted the floorboards of their Victorian-era home, they unearthed more than they bargained for a letter tucked carefully beneath the wood, its paper crisp with age, its ink a ghostly memory. The words etched on the page sent a shiver down their spines. Don't trust the one who knocked. Before they could decipher the cryptic warning, 3 sharp knocks pierced the silence of the house, freezing them in place with a sense of foreboding. Eager to unravel the mystery, Detective Alina Reed and her partner delved into the unsettling discovery, the exposed floorboards a stark reminder of the hidden secrets waiting to be uncovered. With practiced hands, Reed retrieved the note, mindful of potential contamination from the couple's touch. Their unease was palpable as they recounted the eerie knocking that had echoed through the empty rooms, a sound that seemed to reverberate with a chilling significance. Background checks on Sarah and Michael yielded no red flags, painting a picture of a newlywed couple with a stable life. However, the history of their new abode told a different tale. Previously belonging to the Hargrove family, the house had stood silent for years following the passing of its last inhabitant, the reclusive widow Margaret Hargrove. Despite her unassuming nature and peaceful demise, there lingered an unspoken unease surrounding her legacy. As Reed delved deeper into the past, a tale of fear and secrets began to emerge. The note, dated 2 decades prior, bore traces of desperation in its script, hinting at a hidden terror that had gripped Margaret in her twilight years. Through interviews and meticulous research, Reed uncovered a haunting truth buried within the walls of the old house. Franklin Hargrove, Margaret's late husband, had harbored a dark secret and insurmountable gambling debt owed to a notorious loan shark known as Victor Mercer. Franklin's descent into paranoia and fear had culminated in a tragic confrontation, leaving Mercer's remains hidden beneath the foundation, a grim testament to the price of deception. Margaret, burdened by loyalty and fear, had kept the truth concealed, her diary entries a testament to the haunting echoes of the past that lingered in the halls. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a prison of memories, its walls holding secrets that refused to be silenced. With the truth laid bare and justice finally served, Sarah and Michael made the difficult decision to part ways with the house, unable to bear the weight of its history. The once promising renovations now stood abandoned, a poignant reminder of lives intertwined by fate and tragedy. Rumors whispered of spectral knocks in the dead of night, a ghostly reminder of the past that refused to be forgotten. The note, now a relic of a bygone era, remained a chilling testament to the warning that had gone unheeded for too long: don't trust the one who knocked. In the quiet stillness of the vacant house, where shadows danced with memories long past, the truth remained elusive, a lingering enigma that defied simple answers. Detective Reed closed the case with a heavy heart, knowing that some mysteries were destined to remain veiled in the mist of time, their secrets buried deep within the recesses of the human heart. Story 26, The Sleeping Woods. The town held its breath, never speaking of the house at the edge of the whispering woods. It stood solitary, a forgotten relic of time, its windows darkened, its porch groaning under the weight of forgotten years. No one laid claim to its ownership. No one could recall who first raised its weathered walls. But when a group of intrepid hikers strayed too near, they beheld a peculiar sight, names etched into the wooden panels, carved deep like ancient secrets. And at the very bottom, fresh and untouched, a name unfamiliar to them all. Until, with a voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, one of them whispered, "That name is mine." In the dead of night, the call came in. Dispatch logged it as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the leader of the hiking party who had stumbled upon his own name etched into the abandoned house. Responding officers anticipated mere mischief, perhaps a prank among youths, but what they uncovered defied all logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as twilight draped the forest in shadows. Her flashlight pierced the darkness, casting a stark light upon the weather-worn facade of the dwelling. The names 27 in total marched down the eastern wall like silent sentinels. Some had faded with the passage of time, nearly blending into the aged wood. Others remained sharp, as if freshly carved. And at the base, Mason right, the incision still tinged with the scent of newly hewn timber. "I've never set foot here before," Mason insisted, his breath a mist in the frigid air. "I cannot fathom how my name came to be known." Thus began the inquiry as each name was scrutinized. The findings sent shivers down the spines of the detective team. Every name corresponded to a person reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases had grown cold, others remained open. Yet all shared a chilling commonality: the individuals had vanished while trekking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, harkened back to a missing persons case from 37 years past. The records painted a grim picture of a young woman who ventured into the woods and never returned, save for a lone hiking boot discovered by a babbling stream. Detective Keller delved deep into Mason's background, but his account remained unchanged. He bore no ties to the area beyond that fateful hike with 4 college comrades. They had chosen their path at random, guided by an online suggestion. Nothing in Mason's history linked him to the other names adorning the enigmatic house. The focus then turned to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, presented snapshots taken during their journey. Upon close inspection, analysts discerned a disconcerting detail: a blurred figure lurking in the background of 3 separate images. A tall, slender shape, always partially concealed by the surrounding trees. "We encountered no one else on our trek," Emily asserted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a search of the house's interior. While the upper levels lay in desolate disarray, the basement harbored a disquieting tableau. Possessions belonging to the missing hikers were meticulously arrayed on wooden shelves: watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each bearing a name from the wall outside. The evidence team methodically cataloged every item. Beneath the stark glow of ultraviolet light, bloodstains whispered tales of attempts to scrub away the past from the cold concrete floor. Though no bodies lurked beneath the abode, cadaver dogs signaled feverishly near the dense heart of the forest at the property's rear. As the investigation deepened, Detective Keller observed a disconcerting shift in Mason's demeanor. He reported eerie phenomena: whispers in the night, fresh footprints leading to his door but never away, shadowy figures observing from the darkened streets. Despite assigned protection, Mason's paranoia burgeoned. The breakthrough arrived with the unearthing of buried land records. The house had once belonged to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood. An enigma to his neighbors, Blackwood vanished without a trace 15 years prior, his disappearance left uninvestigated. Armed with a warrant, Detective Keller probed the surrounding woods. The search unearthed primitive hunting blinds strategically placed along popular trails. Within one hide, a journal revealed meticulous observations of hikers, their paths, gear, tendencies. The script evolved from hunting strategies for animals to chilling accounts of humans, as prey detailed profiles of victims on the wall, including the intricate methods of their selection. A manhunt for Blackwood unfurled across jurisdictions. Helicopters scoured the forest with thermal eyes. Tactical units combed every crevice and cranny, yet the quarry eluded capture. Mason Wright fell silent. Officers entering his dwelling found it deserted, save for a chilling inscription freshly carved upon his bedroom wall: "The hunter becomes the hunted." The hunt for Mason persisted fruitlessly. However, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's residence, forensic technicians unearthed a sinister secret. Concealed behind a false panel in the basement lay a workshop, replete with woodworking tools, preservatives, and a fresh carving bearing a new name, a name as yet unmounted on the external wall. Detective Keller recognized it at once. It belonged to the chief forensic technician who had processed the house during the initial investigation. The technician had called in unwell that morning and remained uncontactable. Authorities erected an unyielding perimeter around the house, surveilling every approach. Cameras stood sentry, motion sensors vigilant. The trap was set. 3 nights hence, sensors screamed an alert. Surveillance footage captured a figure emerging from the shadows, impossibly tall, unnaturally lined, moving with a spectral grace. As tactical teams closed in, the cameras blinked out. When vision was restored, the figure had vanished into thin air. Today, the house remains under ceaseless watch. Mason Wright and the forensic technician vanished without a trace. The search persists as fresh disappearances echo through wooded realms. The names etched upon that dread wall have transcended into whispered legend among law enforcers. Some officers shun the mention of those names, others shudder at the mere thought, and local hikers skirt wide around the house, dreading that a mere whisper of it might add their names to that grim roster, the names unspoken. Story 27. The aged apartment exuded a sense of history, each creak and groan echoing through the corridors like whispers of the past. The heating system protested with its familiar groans, the pipes adding their own rhythmic rattle to the symphony of the building. To her, it was all part of the charm, the quirks of an old place settling into its own existence. Or so she tried to convince herself, until that fateful moment when everything changed. A voice, faint yet unmistakable, drifted through the vents like a ghostly melody. It wasn't the usual background noise of a neighbor chatting on the phone or the distant hum of traffic. This voice was different, whispering, calling her name with an eerie urgency that sent shivers down her spine. Heart pounding, she pressed her ear against the cold metal grate, straining to catch every elusive word. A sudden rush of icy air brushed past her cheek, carrying with it a soft, almost playful declaration. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the heart of the now empty apartment, a silent witness to the remnants of a chilling mystery. Her gaze lingered on the rusted vent cover, forcibly removed from its place on the wall. The forensic team moved around her with meticulous precision, their cameras capturing every detail of the scene as if preserving a fragment of time. Alina Reeves, the missing victim whose fate had led them to this haunting place, had been gone for 7 long days before anyone noticed her absence. The building manager's discovery was not prompted by concern, but by an ominous odor that lingered in the air, a scent of decay and long-held secrets. Officer Patel, his voice steady but tinged with unease, recited details from his notepad. She reported hearing voices through the vents, he explained, but her fears were dismissed as mere product of the building's age and peculiar noises. Shaw knelt beside the vent, her keen eyes tracing the deep, desperate scratches that marred its edges. These marks were not the result of any tool but of frantic fingers, clawing desperately from the inside in a desperate bid for escape. Alina Reeves, a beloved kindergarten teacher with a penchant for nurturing life, had left behind a world filled with traces of her presence. The perfectly made bed, the unwashed coffee mug in the sink, the chair positioned just beneath the vent, as if patiently awaiting a listener, it all painted a picture of a life abruptly interrupted. Her sister's testimony revealed a troubling narrative of paranoia and fear that had consumed Alina in the days leading up to her disappearance. The whispers through the vents, the sense of being watched, the unshakable conviction that someone or something was reaching out to her from the shadows. As Shaw delved deeper into the investigation, she uncovered a series of unsettling clues that hinted at a darkness lurking within the very walls of the building. Fibers from Aliner's favorite cardigan caught in the vent grating, a mysterious fingerprint on the inside of the vent cover each piece of evidence added to the growing sense of dread that enveloped the case. The audio recordings from Aliner's phone revealed a haunting truth, a chilling dialogue between the victim and an unseen presence that seemed to dwell within the building itself. Shaw listened in solitude, raindrops tapping a somber melody on the roof of her car as the whispers of a spectral voice filled the confines of the vehicle. The building, it seemed, held secrets that transcended mere bricks and mortar. Previous tenants had left behind a trail of unease and inexplicable departures, their stories woven into the very fabric of the structure. Reports of voices in the walls, of hallucinations and unexplained phenomena, painted a picture of a place steeped in malevolence. Harold Weber, the enigmatic building superintendent whose calm facade masked a deeper darkness, became a focal point of the investigation. His nonchalant demeanor crumbled under Shaw's persistent questioning, revealing a web of deceit and manipulation that stretched back years. The discovery of a hidden access panel within Aliner's bathroom, leading to a labyrinthine network of maintenance passages and ventilation shafts, exposed a hidden world lurking just beyond the walls. Shaw and her team unearthed a trove of evidence within this clandestine realm, a makeshift lair filled with remnants of a twisted obsession. Weber's meticulously kept records, his voyeuristic collection of audio recordings and personal belongings from past tenants, painted a portrait of a man consumed by a perverse need to connect with those he watched from the shadows. His arrest, a quiet surrender in the dead of night, marked the end of a reign of terror that had gone unnoticed for far too long. As the trial unfolded and the chilling details of Weber's crimes came to light, a sense of closure settled over the haunted building. The whispers that had plagued its halls began to fade, replaced by a solemn silence that spoke of a darkness finally vanquished. But for those who dared to linger within its walls, the echoes of the past lingered still. Strange sounds from the vents, whispers in the darkness, a sense of being watched all served as reminders of the horrors that had unfolded within the building's ancient confines. The apartment building, now a mere shell of its former self, stood as a silent witness to the ghosts of its past. Despite the fresh coat of paint and the veneer of normalcy, its walls held memories that refused to fade, a testament to the sinister forces that had once taken root within its very heart. And as the heating system groaned and the pipes rattled in their eternal chorus, the residents whispered to themselves, seeking solace in the illusion of normalcy that eluded